The pregnancy test sat in her trembling hand, two pink lines cutting through the darkness like a death sentence. Isabella Moreno had lost everything 6 weeks ago: her marriage, her home, her identity, when Adrian walked out knowing she might be carrying his child. Now, alone on a freezing park bench at midnight, she finally had her answer. But the stranger stepping from the shadows wasn't there to offer sympathy. Luca De Luca's voice was velvet over steel when he said, "You shouldn't face this alone." He knew her name, her story, everything. And that terrified her more than the test ever could. If you're watching from somewhere in the world right now, stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment your city below so I can see how far Isabella's journey travels. Now, let me tell you how a moment of absolute devastation became the doorway to everything she never knew she needed. Pause. The fluorescent lights of the 24-hour convenience store buzzed like dying insects, casting everything in a sickly blue-white glow that made Isabella's reflection in the glass door look corpse pale. She stood in the aisle marked family planning, such a cruel euphemism, staring at the wall of pregnancy tests as if they were grenades waiting to detonate her entire existence. Her hand hovered over the generic brand. The expensive digital ones promised clear answers in words: pregnant or not pregnant. But those cost $30, and Isabella Moreno had exactly $43.16 in her checking account until her unemployment check cleared. If it cleared. The last one had bounced. She grabbed the cheapest box, 2 tests for $8.99. The cashier, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read Dolores, didn't meet her gaze as she scanned the item. "You need a bag, honey?" Isabella shook her head. The box fit easily enough in her coat pocket, next to the eviction notice she'd received that morning. 5 days to vacate the tiny studio apartment in the East Village that she'd once shared with Adrian. The apartment he'd paid for, in his name, that she'd foolishly never questioned because she'd trusted him completely. Trusted. Past tense. Everything about her life was past tense now. The night air hit her like a slap when she pushed through the door. November in Manhattan carried a specific kind of cold, damp and penetrating, the kind that settled into bones and stayed there. Isabella walked without thinking, her feet carrying her the 6 blocks to Washington Square Park through nearly empty streets. A few students stumbled past, drunk and laughing. A homeless man called out for spare change. She had none to give. The park at 11:30 p.m. was a study in shadows and amber streetlight. The famous arch stood sentinel at the north entrance, but Isabella headed for her bench, the one she'd claimed every night for the past 6 weeks, unable to bear the silence of the apartment where Adrian's ghost still lingered in every corner. She'd spent their entire 3-year marriage making herself smaller, quieter, more convenient. Adrian Cole, tech entrepreneur and darling of the startup scene, needed a partner who understood that his work came first, his vision, his future. Isabella had given up her editorial position at a mid-tier publishing house to support his pivot from employee to founder. She'd smile at networking events, remember everyone's names, make sure he ate during 16-hour coding sessions. And when his college sweetheart, Charlotte fucking Chen, had reconnected with him at a conference in San Francisco, Isabella had believed him when he said it meant nothing. She'd believed him right up until the moment he sat her down 6 weeks ago and said, with something almost like pity in his voice, "I'm sorry, Bella. I thought I could build a life with you. But Charlotte, she's always been the one." What he didn't say, what Isabella had discovered only 2 weeks later, buried in deleted emails she'd accessed when desperation drove her to break into his laptop, was that he'd known she might be pregnant when he left. She'd mentioned her period was late the week before he ended things, and instead of staying to find out, he'd run. Now Isabella sat on the cold bench, pulled the pregnancy test from her pocket, and stared at the box as if it might spontaneously combust. The instructions were simple enough: pee on stick, wait 3 minutes. Read result. Simple. Except nothing about this was simple. If it was positive, she was 29 years old, jobless, about to be homeless, and pregnant with the child of a man who'd abandoned her. If it was negative, what then? Relief? Or the crushing realization that she had absolutely nothing left? A park bench at midnight seems like an unusual place for contemplation. The voice came from her left, smooth and cultured, with the faintest trace of an accent she couldn't quite place. Italian, maybe. or just the particular intonation of old money and private schools? Isabella's head snapped up. The man stood perhaps 10 feet away, just at the edge of the streetlight's glow. Tall, easily 6'2" or 6'3", with dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on a Roman coin, sharp cheekbones, a mouth that suggested both sensuality and cruelty, and eyes so dark they appeared black in the amber light. He wore a wool coat that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe, tailored perfectly to broad shoulders and a lean frame. Everything about him screamed danger. Not the crude, obvious danger of street violence, but something far more refined, more controlled. "I'm fine," Isabella said, her fingers closing around the pregnancy test box, hiding it. "Just getting some air." At 11:30 on a Tuesday night in November, his tone suggested polite skepticism. "In Washington Square Park, which hasn't been particularly safe at this hour since approximately 1952. I can take care of myself." "Can you?" He moved closer, just 2 steps, but it brought him fully into the light. His face was even more striking up close, mid-30s perhaps, with the kind of bone structure that would age beautifully. But it was his eyes that caught her. Dark, yes, but not empty. They studied her with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously seen and dissected. "Forgive my intrusion, but you have the look of someone standing at a crossroads. And you have the look of someone who should mind his own business." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Fair enough. Though I find that life's most important moments rarely benefit from solitude." He gestured to the bench. "May I?" Every instinct screamed no. Strange men who approached women alone in parks at night were not to be trusted. And yet something in his manner, the careful distance he maintained, the way he'd asked permission, suggested this wasn't a threat, or at least not the kind she'd initially feared. "It's a public bench," she said finally. He sat, leaving a respectful 2 feet between them. Up close, she caught his scent, something expensive and woody, with notes of bergamot, the kind of cologne that came in bottles shaped like sculptures and cost more than her monthly grocery budget. They sat in silence for a long moment. Isabella expected him to speak, to push, but he simply looked out across the park with an expression of quiet contemplation. "Do you come here often?" she asked finally, hating how the question sounded like a bad pickup line. "Sometimes, when I need to think." He turned those dark eyes on her again. "You?" "Every night for 6 weeks. "Ah." Something flickered across his face. Understanding, perhaps. "Then you are at a crossroads." Isabella looked down at the pregnancy test box still clutched in her hand. No point hiding it now. "Something like that." "May I ask your name?" She should lie, should give him a fake name and walk away. Instead, she heard herself say, Isabella Moreno." "Luca." He offered his hand. His grip was warm, firm, controlled. "Luca de Luca." "That's very Italian. My grandfather would be pleased you noticed. He was quite proud of the family name." Past tense. Isabella is a beautiful name. Regal. "My mother had delusions of grandeur. Or excellent taste." He glanced down at the box in her hand, then back to her face. No judgment in his expression, just that same quiet intensity. "That's a significant decision to face alone." "I don't have much choice in the matter." "We always have choices, Isabella, though sometimes the options are less than ideal." He paused. "The father?" "Gone." The word came out harder than she'd intended. "He left 6 weeks ago, for someone else." "I see. Do you?" She didn't know why she was talking to this stranger, didn't know why his calm presence felt almost comforting. "Do you see what it's like to build an entire life around someone, only to discover you were just a placeholder until the real thing came along?" "Actually," Luca said quietly, "I do." Something in his tone made her look at him properly, really look. Beneath the expensive clothes and aristocratic features, there were shadows. Pain, carefully controlled but unmistakably present. "My younger sister," he continued, his gaze fixed on some distant point, "fell in love with a man who promised her forever. When she became pregnant, he claimed the child wasn't his. Disappeared. Sophia was 22, alone, terrified." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "She didn't tell anyone until it was too late. She'd been trying to handle everything herself, The stress, the fear, the isolation. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "I'm sorry," Isabella whispered. "As am I." Luca turned back to her, and there was something fierce in his eyes now, something almost protective. "Which is why I cannot, in good conscience, watch another young woman face such a moment alone in the dark." "You don't know me." "No, but I know that look in your eyes. I saw it in Sophia's, in the photographs from before, when she was trying to convince herself she was strong enough to carry the world on her shoulders." He leaned forward slightly. "You are strong enough, Isabella, but strength doesn't mean you should have to." A black SUV pulled up to the curb at the edge of the park, sleek, expensive, with windows tinted so dark they reflected nothing. Luca stood. "That's my ride," he said. He reached into his coat and pulled out a card. Heavy stock, embossed lettering. No company name, just a phone number. "If you need anything, and I mean anything, call that number." Isabella took the card numbly. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." "Because Sophia needed someone to help her, and no one did. Because I see you sitting here, about to make a life-changing decision alone, and I have the power to ensure you don't have to." He buttoned his coat. "And because, Isabella Moreno, you deserve better than a cold park bench and a cheap pregnancy test from a convenience store." "How did you—" But she hadn't told him where she bought it. Luca's smile was slight, knowing. "I pay attention. The store is the only 24-hour shop within 6 blocks. The receipt edge is visible in your pocket. Elementary deduction, not surveillance." "Who are you?" "Someone who keeps his promises." He nodded toward the card. "Call if you need me. No strings, no expectations, just call." He walked toward the SUV. The rear door opened as if by magic. Someone inside must have been watching. Before he got in, he turned back. "For what it's worth," he called, "whichever way the test reads, you'll survive this. But you don't have to survive it alone." The door closed. The SUV pulled away, silent as a shadow. And Isabella sat on the bench, staring at a business card with nothing but a phone number, wondering if she'd just hallucinated the entire encounter. Dust. She walked the 6 blocks back to her apartment in a daze. The building was a 5-story walk-up, the kind that had been charming when Adrian was paying the rent and decrepit now that she could see the water stains and peeling paint for what they were. The studio was on the 4th floor. Isabella climbed the stairs slowly, her legs heavy with exhaustion and dread. Inside, she'd left one lamp on. The pharmacy bought one that cast everything in warm yellow tones that almost made the space feel cozy. The bathroom was barely large enough to turn around in. Isabella sat on the closed toilet lid and read the pregnancy test instructions 3 times, stalling, procrastinating, as if delaying the inevitable would somehow change the outcome. Finally, she opened the box with shaking fingers. The process was clinical, mechanical. She followed the instructions precisely, set the test on the sink edge, and forced herself to walk out of the bathroom. 3 minutes. The box said to wait 3 minutes. She paced the 12 feet from the bathroom door to the window and back again. 1 minute. 2. The second hand on the wall clock seemed to move with deliberate slowness, each tick an eternity. At exactly 3 minutes, she walked back into the bathroom and stopped breathing. 2 pink lines, clear as day, unmistakable, positive. Isabella sank to the floor, her back against the bathtub, and stared at the test clutched in her hand. Pregnant. She was pregnant, with Adrian's child. Adrian, who'd known this was a possibility and had chosen to leave anyway. The full weight of her situation crashed down like an avalanche. No job, 5 days until eviction, $43 in her bank account. And now, a baby. A tiny life that would depend entirely on her capacity to provide for it. She should cry, should feel something. But there was only numbness, a vast, echoing emptiness where emotion should be. The business card was still in her coat pocket. Isabella pulled it out, studied the embossed numbers. Luca del Luca. A stranger who'd appeared from nowhere, known things he shouldn't, offered help he had no reason to give. It was insane, calling a strange man she'd met in a park at midnight, telling him she was pregnant, accepting help from someone who was clearly dangerous in ways she didn't fully understand yet. But what choice did she have? Isabella stared at that card until the numbers blurred. Then she set it on the bathroom sink next to the positive pregnancy test and tried to find the strength to face tomorrow. Morning came too soon and not soon enough. Isabella had spent the night on the bathroom floor, drifting in and out of consciousness, unable to force herself to move to the bed that still carried Adrian's scent in the sheets. At 6:47 a.m., her phone buzzed. A notification from her bank. Unemployment deposit. Rejected. Insufficient funds in originating account due to state budget freeze. Expected resolution. 7 to 10 business days. Isabella read the message 3 times. 7 to 10 business days. She had 5 days before eviction. $43. And a baby on the way. At 7:15 a.m., she made coffee with the last of her grounds. Black, because she'd run out of milk 2 days ago and couldn't afford more. At 7:30, she sat at the small table by the window and stared at Luca's business card. He'd said no strings, no expectations. Just call. But men like that, men who wore $1,000 coats and traveled in SUVs with tinted windows, didn't help for free. There was always a price, always an angle. At 8 a.m., there was a knock at her door. Isabella froze. The landlord's goons, probably, coming to make sure she understood the eviction notice. She crept to the peephole, looked out. A woman stood in the hallway. Mid-40s, elegant in a charcoal wool dress and heels, holding a garment bag and a small shopping bag. Professional, polished, completely out of place in this building. "Miss Moreno?" the woman called. "My name is Elena Rossi. I'm here on behalf of Luca De Luca." Isabella's blood ran cold. She opened the door a crack, keeping the chain engaged. "How do you know where I live?" Elena's smile was warm but didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mr. De Luca is a man of considerable resources. May I come in? I promise this will only take a moment." Every instinct screamed danger, but curiosity and a desperate, pathetic hope won out. Isabella unlatched the chain. Elena stepped inside with the careful neutrality of someone trained not to judge their surroundings. She set the garment bag on the back of the couch and the shopping bag on the table. "Mr. De Luca asked me to deliver these," she said, unzipping the garment bag to reveal a coat. Not just any coat, a 3/4 length wool blend in deep camel with a silk lining visible at the collar. The kind of coat Isabella had admired in shop windows but never imagined owning. "He noticed you seemed cold last night." Isabella stared. "He can't just... I don't know him. There's also this." Elena pulled a small box from the shopping bag. Prenatal vitamins, the expensive kind, the ones her doctor had recommended when she'd had insurance, when Adrian had been paying for insurance. "How does he know I'm pregnant?" Isabella's voice cracked. "I didn't tell him. I didn't even know last night." "Mr. De Luca is observant," Elena said calmly. "And he's seen the signs before, with his sister. He hoped he was wrong, but given that I'm here, I assume he wasn't." Isabella sank into the chair. "What does he want?" "To talk with you, at your convenience." Elena placed another card on the table, this one with an address in Tribeca. "Today, if possible. Though he understands if you need time to process." "I can't accept these." Isabella gestured at the coat, the vitamins. "I don't even know him." "Then get to know him." Elena's expression softened slightly. "Look, I've worked for Mr. De Luca for 8 years. I know how this looks. Strange man, expensive gifts, too good to be true. But he meant what he said last night. No strings, no expectations. He just wants to help." "Why?" "Because his sister didn't get help. And it killed her." Elena's voice was quiet but firm. "Because he has more money than he knows what to do with, and a considerable amount of guilt. And because, for whatever reason, he sees something in you worth protecting." She headed for the door, then paused. "The address is for a private restaurant. It doesn't officially open until dinner service, but Mr. De Luca owns it. You can meet there safely, publicly, or not at all. It's entirely your choice." Elena left. The coat remained, draped over the couch like a question mark. The prenatal vitamins sat on the table next to the eviction notice, a study in contrasts. Isabella picked up the coat. It was impossibly soft, perfectly weighted. She slipped it on. It fit as if made for her. In the mirror by the door, she looked like a different person. Someone who belonged in the world Luca de Luca clearly inhabited. Someone who wasn't standing on the edge of total collapse. She looked down at the address card. Tribeca. A 40-minute subway ride, assuming the trains were running on time. This was insane. Dangerous. Probably the worst decision she could make. But the eviction notice was real. The pregnancy was real. And the $43 in her bank account wouldn't even cover the subway fare for a week of job hunting. Isabella grabbed her phone and the address card. She was likely walking into a trap. But she was already trapped. At least this way, she'd know what kind. The restaurant sat on a quiet street in Tribeca, the kind of block where the buildings were all renovated warehouses and the cars parked along the curbs started at 6 figures. The exterior was understated. A black door with a small brass plaque that read, Il Giardino Segreto, the secret garden. Isabella stood across the street for 10 minutes, debating. Pedestrians flowed past, all purposeful and professional in their designer coats and leather shoes. She didn't belong here. In her borrowed coat and her 3-year-old boots, she was a fraud playing dress-up. But the coat was warm, warmer than anything she'd owned in years, and that small comfort gave her just enough courage to cross the street. She knocked. The door opened immediately as if someone had been waiting. Elena stood there, her expression professionally pleasant. Ms. Moreno, please, come in. The interior took Isabella's breath away. The restaurant was small, perhaps 15 tables, but every detail spoke of quiet luxury. Exposed brick walls, warm lighting from Edison bulbs in wrought iron fixtures, velvet upholstery in deep jewel tones. The air smelled of fresh bread and something savory, rich with garlic and herbs. And there, at a table by the window, sat Luca de Luca. He stood as she approached. Today, he wore dark slacks and a charcoal sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent used to be. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. It made him look more human, almost approachable. Isabella. His voice held genuine warmth. Thank you for coming. Please, sit. She did, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from shaking. Elena disappeared into the back. They were alone. I assume, Luca said, the test was positive. Straight to it then. No pleasantries. Isabella appreciated that. How did you know to send the vitamins? I hoped I was wrong, but I've learned to trust my instincts. He poured water from a crystal carafe into her glass. And I wanted you to have what you needed, regardless of the result. You can't just send your assistant to people's homes with expensive gifts. It's intrusive. I know. He leaned back, his dark eyes steady on hers. I apologize. Elena told me you seemed uncomfortable. That wasn't my intention. What was your intention? To ensure you weren't facing this alone. He paused. May I speak plainly? Isabella nodded, not trusting her voice. You're pregnant, jobless, and about to be evicted. You have no support system. If you did, you wouldn't have been in that park alone at midnight. The father has abandoned you, and you're terrified but trying very hard not to show it. His tone wasn't cruel, just factual. Does that about summarize the situation? Hearing it laid out so starkly made something crack in Isabella's chest. You forgot the part where I'm a complete stranger accepting help from another complete stranger who somehow knows everything about my life. I make it my business to understand situations thoroughly before involving myself. Luca folded his hands on the table. Isabella, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully. Can you do that? She nodded again. I'm not a good man, he said quietly. I run an organization that operates in the shadows. I make decisions that would horrify most people. I have power, influence, and resources that come from places you probably don't want to know about. He leaned forward slightly. But I also have principles, lines I don't cross. And one of those lines is this: I do not allow pregnant women to suffer when I have the means to help them. Isabella's mouth went dry. You're telling me you're a criminal. I'm telling you I am not a saint. There's a difference. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm about to make you an offer, and I need you to make an informed decision. He pulled a leather folder from the chair beside him, set it on the table. I own several properties in Manhattan, safe buildings with excellent security. I'd like to offer you an apartment, fully furnished, utilities included, No rent. Isabella stared at him. You can't be serious. I'm entirely serious. He opened the folder, revealed photographs. A beautiful high-rise in what looked like Murray Hill. Modern, sleek, secure. In exchange, I ask three things. First, you maintain your health and attend all medical appointments. Second, you're honest with me about what you need. And third, you allow me to ensure you and your child are safe. That's insane. Isabella pushed back from the table. I don't even know you. This could be a trap. I know how it sounds. Luca's voice remained calm, which is why I'm not asking for an answer today. Think about it. Consider your options. And when you're ready, if you're ready, we'll discuss details. There's always a catch, Isabella said. Men like you don't help for free. Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe. You're right to be suspicious, so let me be clear. I'm not asking for your body. I'm not asking for your loyalty to my organization. I'm not asking you to compromise yourself in any way. He paused. I'm asking you to let me do for you what I couldn't do for Sophia, to give you the support she needed and didn't get. That's not fair, Isabella whispered. You're using your grief to manipulate me. Perhaps. He didn't deny it. But it's also the truth. My sister died 6 years ago from complications during pregnancy. Complications that could have been prevented if she'd had proper medical care, stable housing, and emotional support. She was too proud to ask for help, too afraid of judgment. His jaw tightened. I won't watch another woman go through that when I can prevent it. I'm not your sister. No. But you're in a similar situation, and I have the power to change the outcome. Isabella looked down at the photographs. The apartment was beautiful. More than beautiful. It was safe, secure. Everything she needed and couldn't provide for herself. What happens after the baby is born? She asked quietly. That depends on you. If you want to stay in the apartment, raise your child there, you can. If you want to leave, find your own place. I'll help you do that too. There's no time limit, no conditions. And if I say no to all of this, Luca closed the folder, then you walk out that door, and I respect your decision. No pressure, no retaliation. You keep the coat and the vitamins, and I hope you find another solution. A door opened at the back of the restaurant. Elena appeared, followed by a chef in whites carrying 2 plates. The aroma hit Isabella like a physical force, something with tomatoes and cheese and fresh basil that made her stomach growl audibly. Luca smiled slightly. Have you eaten today? No. Then, at minimum, let me feed you. Whatever else you decide, you shouldn't make major life choices on an empty stomach. The chef set the plates down. Homemade pasta with a sauce that looked like liquid gold. Thick slices of bread, still steaming. A small salad with leaves so green they almost glowed. Isabella's resistance crumbled at the sight of real food. Food that wasn't ramen or the day-old bagels from the corner store. She picked up her fork. Thank you, she whispered. Eat, Luca said gently. We can talk after. They ate in silence. The pasta was transcendent, rich and complex, with layers of flavor that made Isabella want to cry. She didn't realize how hungry she was until the plate was empty and she was sopping up the last of the sauce with bread. When she looked up, Luca was watching her with an expression that was almost tender. My mother used to say that good food heals more than the body, he said. It heals the soul. Your mother was a smart woman. She was. He set down his fork. She died when I was 17, left me and Sophia alone with our father, who was not a kind man. Isabella heard the weight in those words, the pain beneath the controlled surface. I'm sorry. We survived, though not unscathed. He poured more water into her glass. But that's ancient history. What matters now is your future. You said you'd give me time to think. I did, and I will. He pulled a phone from his pocket, sleek, expensive, and held it out. This is for you. It has one number programmed in. Mine. If you need anything before you make your decision, call. If you decide you want to take me up on the offer, call. If you just need someone to talk to at 2 a.m. because you're terrified, call. Isabella took the phone numbly. It was warm from being in his pocket. I can't accept this. You already have. He stood, buttoned his coat. Elena will drive you wherever you need to go. Think about what I've said. And Isabella? She looked up at him. You're stronger than you think, he said quietly. But strength doesn't mean you have to fight every battle alone. He walked toward the back of the restaurant and disappeared through a door marked private. Elena materialized at Isabella's elbow. Whenever you're ready, Ms. Moreno. Isabella sat for a long moment, staring at the phone in her hand. The folder with the apartment photos sat on the table, an impossible promise wrapped in expensive leather. This was crazy. All of it. Accepting gifts from a self-admitted criminal. Considering his offer of an apartment. Letting herself hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a way through this nightmare that didn't end in complete destruction. But the food in her stomach was real. The coat on her shoulders was real. And the phone in her hand was a lifeline she desperately needed. Miss Moreno? Elena's voice was gentle. Where can I take you? Isabella looked at the eviction notice crumpled in her coat pocket, at the phone with its single program number, at the future spreading out before her like a minefield. Home, she said finally. Take me home. She'd think about Luca De Luca's offer, consider every angle, every risk, every possible trap. But first she needed to survive the next 5 days, and the phone in her pocket suddenly felt like the only thing standing between her and the abyss. The SUV's leather seats were heated, a small luxury that made Isabella acutely aware of how long it had been since she'd experienced any comfort at all. Elena drove in silence through midday traffic, navigating the chaos of Manhattan with practiced ease. Isabella watched the city slide past her window, tourists bundling against the cold, business people rushing to lunch meetings, the whole pulsing organism of New York going about its day completely unaware that her world had just tilted on its axis. When they pulled up to her building, Elena didn't comment on the peeling paint or the trash bags piled on the curb. She simply handed Isabella a cream-colored envelope. Mr. De Luca wanted you to have this as well, she said. No pressure, just options. Inside the envelope were $500 bills and a handwritten note on heavy cardstock. For groceries, utilities, whatever you need while you decide. Not a loan, not an obligation, just making sure you eat. L. Isabella's hands trembled as she stared at the money. $500. More than 10 times what she had in her bank account. Enough to buy real food, pay her phone bill, maybe even make a dent in the mounting credit card debt from the months she'd spent supporting Adrian's dream. I can't, she whispered. Elena's expression was kind but firm. You can. And given your situation, you should. There's no shame in accepting help when you need it, Ms. Moreno. Only in letting pride destroy you when salvation is offered. Isabella climbed the 4 flights to her apartment with the envelope burning in her pocket like stolen goods. Inside, the space felt smaller than ever, claustrophobic. The walls seemed to press in, reminding her that she had exactly 4 days left before she'd be on the street. She spread the bills on her tiny table and stared at them. $500 from a man who'd admitted to being a criminal, who'd somehow known where she lived, what she needed, the exact shape of her desperation. It should terrify her. It did terrify her, but it also felt like oxygen after drowning. Isabella picked up the phone Luca had given her. The screen lit up at her touch, showing a single contact, Luca De Luca. No photo, no additional information, just the name and a number. She set it down, picked it up again, set it down. The pregnancy test still sat on the bathroom sink where she'd left it, those 2 pink lines a constant reminder that this wasn't just about her anymore. There was a life growing inside her, a tiny cluster of cells that would become a person, a child who would need food and shelter and safety. A child whose father had known it might exist and had left anyway. Isabella's hand moved to her stomach, still flat beneath her shirt. I don't know what I'm doing, she whispered to the emptiness. I don't know how to do any of this. The apartment offered no answers, only silence and the distant sound of her neighbor's television bleeding through the thin walls. She lasted 3 days. 3 days of stretching the $500 as far as it would go. 3 days of applying to jobs she was overqualified for and hearing nothing back. 3 days of dodging calls from her landlord's lawyer and trying to figure out if there were any shelters that took pregnant women. On the 3rd day, at 2:47 in the afternoon, the building superintendent knocked on her door with 2 large men in work uniforms. Moreno? The super was a thick man named Pete, who'd always been polite enough when Adrian was paying the rent. Now his expression was apologetic but firm. Need to start the eviction process. You got till end of day tomorrow to clear out, or we're changing the locks and putting your stuff in storage. You'll have 30 days to claim it before it goes to auction. Isabella looked past him at the two workers. They carried toolboxes and measuring tape, already planning how to turn her home into someone else's. I understand, she said, proud that her voice didn't shake. Pete shifted uncomfortably. Look, I'm sorry, I got my orders. Owners cracking down on delinquent tenants, nothing personal. Of course not. She closed the door before he could see her hands trembling. End of day tomorrow, less than 30 hours. She had nowhere to go. No friends close enough to impose on for more than a night or two. No family. Her mother had died when she was 19, and her father had remarried and moved to Arizona with a new family that didn't include much room for the daughter from his first marriage. Isabella sat on her bed and pulled out both phones. Her old one, cracked screen and dying battery, and Luca's pristine offering. She stared at them both for a long time. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. She picked up Luca's phone and pressed the single contact before she could second-guess herself. He answered on the first ring. Isabella. Not a question, just her name, spoken in that voice like dark honey, as if he'd been waiting for this call. The offer, she said. The apartment. Is it still available? Yes. I need to know what you really want from me. Her voice cracked despite her best efforts. Please, I can't walk into this blind. If there's a price, tell me now. Silence stretched between them. Then Luca spoke, and his tone was impossibly gentle. Where are you right now? My apartment. My soon-to-be former apartment. I'm sending Elena. She'll be there in 20 minutes. We'll talk in person. Luca? 20 minutes, Isabella, and then I'll answer every question you have. The line went dead. Elena arrived in 18 minutes, driving a different vehicle this time, a discreet sedan that wouldn't draw attention in Isabella's neighborhood. She helped carry down the 3 boxes and 2 suitcases that contained everything Isabella owned after Adrian had taken what he wanted from their shared life. They drove to Murray Hill in silence. The building was even more impressive in person, 30 stories of steel and glass, with a doorman who nodded respectfully to Elena and held the door without question. The lobby was all marble and soft lighting, with abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than Isabella had made in a year at her old job. The elevator required a key card to access the upper floors. Elena swiped hers and pressed the button for the 23rd floor. Mr. DeLuca is waiting in the apartment, she said. Take your time. Look around. Ask your questions. I'll bring up your things. The elevator doors opened onto a quiet hallway with only 4 doors. Elena led her to 23C and knocked once before opening it. The apartment took Isabella's breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, letting in floods of natural light. The living room was spacious and beautifully furnished with a deep gray sectional, a glass coffee table, and built-in bookshelves already filled with books. The kitchen gleamed with stainless steel appliances and granite countertops. Through an open door, she could see a bedroom with a king-sized bed and furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. And there, standing by the windows with his hands in his pockets, was Luca. He dressed down, jeans and a black sweater, but still radiated that quiet authority that seemed to fill whatever space he occupied. When he turned to face her, his expression was unreadable. "What do you think?" he asked. Isabella couldn't speak. She walked slowly through the space, touching surfaces to confirm they were real. The bathroom had a soaking tub and a separate shower with rainfall fixtures. The bedroom closet was larger than her old bathroom. The second bedroom was empty but could easily become a nursery. She found her voice in the kitchen, staring at the 6-burner stove. "This is too much." "It's what you need." Luca had followed her, maintaining a respectful distance. "A safe space, room to breathe, a place to build your life. No one just gives someone an apartment like this." "I do." He leaned against the counter, his dark eyes steady on hers. "You asked me to be honest. So here's the truth, Isabella. I'm a very wealthy man who made his fortune in ways that would make you uncomfortable. I run an organization that deals in information, influence, and occasionally violence when necessary. I am not a good man by most definitions." Isabella's heart hammered against her ribs. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know who you're accepting help from. He crossed his arms. I won't lie to you. I won't pretend to be something I'm not. And I need you to understand that accepting this apartment doesn't make you complicit in my business. You're not joining my organization. You're not becoming involved in my work. You're simply a woman who needs help, and I have the means to provide it. But why? Her voice rose despite her best efforts to stay calm. Why me? Why do you care? Something flickered across his face, pain, quickly controlled. Because 6 years ago, my sister Sophia sat in her apartment, much worse than this one, trying to figure out how to afford prenatal vitamins. She was 22, alone, and convinced she had to handle everything herself. She didn't tell me about the pregnancy until she was 7 months along. Didn't ask for help until it was too late. He moved to the window, staring out at the city below. She went into early labor at 34 weeks. Complications from untreated preeclampsia. By the time I got to the hospital, she was dying. The baby, my niece, lived for 6 hours. Isabella's hand went to her mouth. I'm so sorry. I held that baby, Luca continued, his voice tight with controlled emotion. 6 hours. That's all she had. Because Sophia was too proud and too afraid to ask for help. Because I was too busy building my empire to notice she was struggling. He turned back to Isabella. So when I saw you in that park, alone and terrified with a pregnancy test in your hand, I saw Sophia. And I decided that this time I wouldn't let pride and fear win. I'm not your sister. No. But you're in the same position she was. And I have spent 6 years building enough power and wealth to make sure no woman ever has to face what she faced. Not if I can prevent it. He took a step toward her. So here's what I want from you, Isabella. I want you to live in this apartment. I want you to see a good doctor. I want you to eat well and sleep safely and focus on staying healthy. That's it. That's the entire price. You expect me to believe you want nothing in return? I expect you to be suspicious, cautious, smart. His mouth quirked in something almost like a smile. But I also expect you to be practical. You have no home, no job, no support system, and you're pregnant with a child whose father abandoned you. You can accept my help and give yourself and your baby a chance, or you can cling to pride and end up in a situation that could hurt you both. Isabella sank into one of the kitchen chairs, her legs suddenly unable to support her. This doesn't make sense. Men don't just do this. Most men aren't trying to atone for their failures. Luca pulled out the chair across from her and sat. I couldn't save Sophia. Couldn't save my niece. That guilt lives in me every day. But I can save you. I can make sure your child has a chance that mine didn't. What if I take the apartment and then disappear? What's stopping me from just using you and leaving? Nothing. And if that's what you choose to do, I hope you and your child are happy wherever you end up. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table. Isabella, I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this to control you. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do and because I have the power to do it. There are no strings, no hidden clauses, no moment where I'm going to show up and demand payment. Everyone wants something. I want to sleep at night knowing I didn't stand by and watch another woman suffer when I could have helped. That's what I want. Is that so hard to believe? Isabella looked into his eyes and saw the truth there. The pain, the guilt, the desperate need to make something right that could never truly be made right. You're using your grief to manipulate me, she said quietly. Perhaps, but it's still the truth. He stood. Look, I'll leave you to explore the apartment. Elena brought up your things. There's food in the refrigerator, fully stocked. The lease is in a trust. You can't be evicted. The building has 24-hour security. You're safe here. What if I say no? Luca paused at the door. Then I'll have Elena drive you wherever you want to go. But Isabella, I really hope you don't. For your sake, and your child's. He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Isabella sat alone in the beautiful apartment, surrounded by luxury she'd never dreamed of having, and tried to figure out if she'd just been saved or trapped. The apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the city beyond the windows. She forced herself to stand, to explore properly. The refrigerator was indeed fully stocked with fresh produce, quality meats, eggs, milk, juice. The freezer held ice cream in 3 flavors. The pantry had pasta, rice, canned goods, spices. In the bathroom, she found expensive toiletries, fluffy towels, a bathrobe so soft it felt like wearing a cloud. The bedroom closet held hangers waiting for her meager wardrobe. And in the second bedroom, she found a rocking chair positioned by the window, as if someone had already imagined her sitting there with a baby in her arms. That's what broke her. Isabella sank into the rocking chair and let herself cry for the first time since Adrian had left. Great shuddering sobs that came from somewhere deep in her chest. She cried for the life she'd lost, the future she'd imagined, the version of herself who'd been naive enough to trust someone completely. She cried for Sophia, a woman she'd never met who'd died alone and afraid. She cried for the impossibility of her situation and the strange, terrifying kindness of a man who claimed to be a criminal but who'd shown her more care than anyone in months. When the tears finally stopped, she felt emptied out but oddly calm. She pulled out the phone Luca had given her and typed a message. "I'll stay, for now. Thank you." The response came within seconds. "I'm glad. There's a medical appointment scheduled for you tomorrow at 10 a.m., Dr. Rachel Morrison, one of the best OBs in the city. Elena will take you. Rest tonight. You're safe now." Isabella read the message 3 times. Safe. When was the last time she'd felt safe? She wandered back to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. The sight of actual food, fresh vegetables, quality proteins, dairy products that weren't about to expire, made her stomach growl. She pulled out ingredients almost at random and started cooking. Nothing fancy, just scrambled eggs with cheese and vegetables, toast with real butter. But as she stood at the beautiful stove in the beautiful kitchen, she felt something unfamiliar unfurl in her chest. Hope. Maybe it wouldn't last. Maybe Luca de Luca would turn out to be exactly what her instincts warned her about. Dangerous, controlling, demanding payment she couldn't afford to give. But for tonight, she had a safe place to sleep and food in her stomach. For tonight, she wasn't alone. And for tonight, that was enough. She ate at the small dining table by the window, watching the city lights come on as dusk fell. When she finished, she washed her dishes and explored the rest of the apartment more thoroughly. Someone had unpacked her boxes and suitcases. Her clothes hung in the closet, her toiletries arranged in the bathroom, her few books placed on the shelves alongside dozens of others. In the living room, she found a note on the coffee table in elegant handwriting. "The building has a gym on the 5th floor, a rooftop garden on the 31st. Concierge is available 24/7 for anything you need. Your name is on the approved resident list. You belong here. E. Elena." Somehow, the older woman's practicality made this all feel more real, less like a fever dream and more like actual life. Isabella took a bath in the massive tub, using soap that smelled like lavender and cost more than she wanted to think about. She wrapped herself in the cloud-soft bathrobe and sat on the bed, her bed now, apparently, and tried to process the surreal turn her life had taken. 3 days ago, she'd been facing homelessness. Now she lived in a luxury apartment that most New Yorkers would kill for. 3 days ago, she'd been alone and terrified. Now she had a doctor's appointment scheduled and someone who seemed genuinely invested in her well-being. It was too much, too fast, too good to be true. But the bed was comfortable, and she was so tired. Isabella crawled under the covers, high thread count, soft as silk, and let exhaustion pull her under. For the first time in 6 weeks, she slept through the night without waking. The next morning, Elena arrived at 9:30 sharp. Isabella had been awake since 7, nervous energy making sleep impossible. She dressed in her best outfit, a simple navy dress that was starting to feel tight around the middle, and attempted to do something with her hair. "You look lovely," Elena said approvingly. "Dr. Morrison's office is in the Upper East Side. We'll need to leave in a few minutes to make the appointment." The drive took 40 minutes through morning traffic. Elena filled the silence with practical information: where to find the nearest grocery store, how to use the building's package room, the name of a good dry cleaner nearby. It felt surreal, this crash course in how to live a life Isabella had never imagined having. Dr. Morrison's office was in a renovated brownstone, all warm wood and soft lighting designed to put patients at ease. The waiting room had comfortable chairs and recent magazines and a receptionist who greeted Isabella by name. "Ms. Moreno, welcome. Please, have a seat. Dr. Morrison will be with you shortly." Isabella sat, acutely aware that she was the only patient in the waiting room not wearing designer clothes or carrying a purse that cost more than a month's rent. She felt like an imposter, a fraud playing dress-up in someone else's life. First prenatal visit? The woman next to her was perhaps 35, glowing with that pregnancy radiance people always talked about. Her hand rested on a noticeable bump. "Yes," Isabella said. "Dr. Morrison is wonderful, very thorough. You'll love her." The woman smiled warmly. "How far along are you?" "I'm not sure. Maybe 6 or 7 weeks?" "Oh, early days. How exciting." The woman's enthusiasm was genuine. "Is this your first?" Isabella nodded, not trusting her voice. "It's magical," the woman said softly. "Terrifying and overwhelming and completely magical. You'll see." Before Isabella could respond, a nurse appeared. "Isabella Moreno?" The examination room was warm and welcoming, decorated with photos of babies and positive affirmations about motherhood. The nurse, name tag reading Janice, took Isabella's vital signs with practiced efficiency. "Blood pressure's a little elevated," Janice noted, writing on her chart. "But that's normal given the circumstances. First prenatal visits can be stressful. Dr. Morrison will be right in." Doctor. Rachel Morrison turned out to be a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and capable hands. She reviewed Isabella's chart, asked questions about her medical history, and listened without judgment as Isabella explained the situation, the divorce, the pregnancy, the uncertainty about dates. "Well, let's see what we're working with," Dr. Morrison said. "We'll do an ultrasound, some blood work, and go from there. Sound good?" The ultrasound was both terrifying and miraculous. Isabella lay on the examination table, gel cold on her exposed stomach, watching the grainy black and white image on the screen as Dr. Morrison moved the wand. "There," the doctor said, pointing. "See that flutter? That's the heartbeat." And there it was, a tiny, rapid flutter in the center of the gray mass, proof that there was an actual life growing inside her. Not just an abstract concept or 2 pink lines on a test, a real living being with a heartbeat. "Based on measurements, I'd estimate you're about 7 weeks along," Dr. Morrison continued, "which puts your due date around," she calculated on her tablet, "July 15th, give or take." July. Isabella would be a mother by July. The thought made her dizzy. "Everything looks good so far," the doctor said, handing her paper towels to wipe off the gel. "The heartbeat is strong and steady. You're measuring right on track. I'm going to prescribe prenatal vitamins, though I see someone already provided those, and I want to see you back in 4 weeks." "Is there anything I should be worried about?" Isabella asked. Dr. Morrison's expression grew serious. "Stress. That's the big one. I understand you're going through a significant life transition right now. Try to minimize stress where you can. Eat well, sleep when you can, take gentle walks. And if you notice any unusual symptoms, heavy bleeding, severe cramping, dizziness, call immediately." "Okay. Also," the doctor added gently, "I'd recommend connecting with a therapist. Pregnancy is hard enough without the additional burden of recent divorce and financial instability. Taking care of your mental health is just as important as taking care of your physical health." Isabella nodded, fighting back tears. The kindness in Dr. Morrison's voice was almost too much to bear. In the waiting room, Elena stood immediately when Isabella emerged. "How did it go?" "Good. Everything's good." Isabella clutched the ultrasound photo Dr. Morrison had given her. "The baby has a heartbeat." Elena's expression softened. "Of course it does. May I see?" Isabella showed her the grainy image. Elena studied it with what looked like genuine interest. "Beautiful," she said simply. "Mr. DeLuca will want to know everything went well, unless you'd prefer to tell him yourself." "You can tell him. I'm sure he's busy." "He's never too busy for this." Elena held the door open. "Now, let's get you home. You look exhausted." The apartment felt more welcoming when they returned. Elena helped her put away the groceries they'd picked up on the way back, more fresh produce, protein, healthy snacks, and showed her how to use the high-tech coffee maker. "Mr. DeLuca wanted me to give you this," Elena said, pulling out a credit card from her purse. "It's for expenses, groceries, maternity clothes, anything you need. There's no limit, no questions asked. Just use it." Isabella stared at the black card with her name embossed on it. "I can't." "You can and you will. Doctor's orders, you need to eat well and take care of yourself. That requires money. Mr. DeLuca has plenty of it. Consider this part of the arrangement. Elena's tone left no room for argument. He'll be very displeased if you don't use it. After Elena left, Isabella sat on the couch and pulled out the phone Luca had given her. She should call him, thank him, tell him about the appointment. Instead, she sent a text. Everything went well. Baby is healthy. Due date, July 15th. The response was immediate. I'm glad. You must be exhausted. Rest. We'll talk soon. Simple. Straightforward. No demands, no invasive questions. Just quiet support from a distance. Isabella looked around the beautiful apartment, at the ultrasound photo on the coffee table, at the credit card that represented more financial security than she'd ever had. This wasn't how she'd imagined her life going. She was supposed to be married, stable, planning a family with someone who loved her. Instead, she was accepting help from a self-admitted criminal who'd inserted himself into her life with the force of a summer storm. But her baby had a heartbeat, and for the first time in months, she had hope. That had to count for something. The days that followed developed a rhythm. Isabella slept late, ate regular meals, took walks through the neighborhood. Elena checked in daily, always professional but increasingly warm. The apartment began to feel less like a temporary refuge and more like an actual home. Luca kept his distance. No unexpected visits, no invasive check-ins, just the occasional text. How are you feeling? Did you try the restaurant on Madison Avenue? They deliver excellent soup. That reminded her he was there, watching from afar, making sure she was okay. It should have felt suffocating. Instead, it felt oddly comforting. 2 weeks after moving in, Isabella was sorting through the closet when her phone buzzed. Not Luca's phone, her old one, which she'd kept charged out of habit. The number on the screen made her blood run cold. Adrian. Her hand trembled as she stared at his name. He'd blocked her number after leaving. She'd tried calling once, 2 days after he ended things, desperate for closure or explanation or something. The call hadn't gone through. Now he was calling her. Isabella answered before she could second-guess herself. Hello? Bella. His voice was exactly as she remembered, smooth, confident, with that slight tone of condescension he'd always used when he thought he was being clever. I've been trying to find you. What do you want, Adrian? I heard you moved. Nice building, Murray Hill, right? Much better than that dump in the East Village. He paused. Who's paying for it, Bella? Her stomach turned to ice. How do you know where I'm living? I still have friends in the city. People talk. Another pause, calculated for effect. Is it true? Are you pregnant? Isabella closed her eyes. Of course he knew. Someone must have seen her at Dr. Morrison's office, or maybe he'd hired someone to follow her. Adrian had always been paranoid about his image, his reputation. Yes, she said flatly. Is it mine? The question hit like a physical blow. You know it is. We were together until you left. There hasn't been anyone else. Then why didn't you tell me? Because you left knowing I might be pregnant. Her voice rose despite her best efforts to stay calm. You got my email about my period being late. You knew there was a possibility, and you left anyway. I thought you were just late. Women are late all the time. I didn't think... He stopped. Look, Charlotte and I, it didn't work out. She went back to her husband, and I've been thinking about us, about what we had. No. You haven't even heard what I'm going to say. I don't need to. Isabella's hand went to her stomach, protective. You made your choice, Adrian. You chose Charlotte. You left me with nothing. No job, no apartment, no support. You knew I might be carrying your child, and you walked away. I made a mistake. His voice took on that pleading tone he'd used when he wanted something. Bella, please. I'm still your husband. We're still legally married. That's my baby you're carrying. You lost the right to claim this baby when you abandoned us. Abandoned? Now his tone hardened. I'm the one who supported you for 3 years while you played at being an editor. I'm the one who paid for everything, the apartment, the food, your clothes. You'd be nothing without me. There it was. The Adrian she'd started to see in those final months, the one who kept score, who held every kindness over her head like a weapon. You're right, Isabella said quietly. I would be nothing. That's exactly what you tried to make me. Nothing. Invisible. Just an accessory to your success. She stood straighter. But I'm not nothing anymore, and this baby isn't yours to claim when it's convenient. We're still married, Bella. I have rights. Then use them. File for custody. Hire a lawyer. Do whatever you think you need to do. Her voice was steady now, all fear burned away by cold anger. But know this, you walked away. You don't get to walk back in just because your backup plan failed. She hung up before he could respond. Her hands were shaking. Her heart hammered against her ribs. But beneath the fear was something else, something that felt almost like strength. The phone in her other hand, Luca's phone, buzzed with a text. Is everything all right? Isabella stared at it. How did he know? Was he monitoring her calls, having her watched? She typed back, Adrian called. He knows about the baby. Knows where I'm living. The response came 30 seconds later. I'm coming over. Luca arrived 20 minutes later. Isabella heard the knock and opened the door to find him standing in the hallway, his dark eyes scanning her face with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously exposed and protected. He wore a charcoal suit today, perfectly tailored, as if he'd come directly from some business meeting. But his tie was loosened, the top button of his shirt undone, and there was tension in his shoulders that suggested he'd rushed. Are you hurt? His voice was controlled, but Isabella caught the edge of concern beneath it. No, I'm fine. He just called. He didn't... She stepped back. Come in. Luca entered, and somehow the spacious apartment felt smaller with him in it. He had a presence that filled rooms, that demanded attention, even when he was trying to be unobtrusive. He moved to the windows, looked out at the city, then turned back to face her. Tell me exactly what he said. Isabella relayed the conversation, watching as Luca's expression grew progressively darker. When she got to the part about Adrian knowing where she lived, his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He's having you followed, Luca said flatly, or he's hired someone to dig into your life. Either way, it's a problem. How did you know something was wrong? Isabella asked. You texted me right after I hung up with him. Luca had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. I have security monitoring your phone activity, not listening to calls, he added quickly at her expression. Just flagged numbers. When Adrian's number appeared, I was notified. You're monitoring my phone. For your safety. He held up a hand before she could protest. I know how that sounds. But Isabella, you're carrying the child of a man who abandoned you. A man with money and connections, and apparently no qualms about tracking you down. I needed to know if he tried to contact you. Isabella wanted to be angry. Should be angry. But the truth was, she felt relieved. He said he made a mistake, that Charlotte went back to her husband. He wants... I don't even know what he wants. He wants control. Luca's voice was cold. Men like Adrian Cole don't handle loss well. You were supposed to wait for him. Be grateful if he came back. The fact that you've moved on, found stability without him, it threatens his narrative. I haven't moved on. I'm just surviving. You're doing more than surviving. Luca moved closer, but maintained that careful distance he always kept. You're building a life. You're taking care of yourself and your child. You're stronger than he gave you credit for, and that terrifies him. He threatened custody. Of course he did. Luca pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. But threatening and following through are different things. Adrian Cole is a tech entrepreneur with a carefully cultivated public image. Fighting for custody of a child he abandoned would raise questions he won't want to answer. You've researched him. The moment you mentioned his name, I had my people compile everything. Luca's tone was matter-of-fact. Adrian Cole, age 32, founder and former CEO of Venture Tech Solutions. Forced out 6 months ago after allegations of misappropriated funds. Currently unemployed and living off the severance package his lawyers negotiated. His relationship with Charlotte Chen lasted exactly 5 weeks before she returned to her husband, a venture capitalist who could actually advance her career. Isabella sank onto the couch. He never told me he was forced out. Because it would shatter the image of the brilliant entrepreneur brought down by tragic love. Luca sat in the chair across from her, elbows on his knees, focused entirely on her face. Isabella, Adrian is not in a position to fight for custody. He has no job, no stable income beyond severance that will run out, and a reputation that's already damaged. Any lawyer worth their retainer would advise him to sign away parental rights and walk away clean. But what if he doesn't? What if he decides to fight just to hurt me? then he'll discover that fighting me is considerably more difficult than fighting you. The quiet menace in Luca's voice made Isabella shiver. I meant what I said. You're under my protection. That extends to legal matters. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. He leaned back, his expression softening slightly. But there's something you should understand. If Adrian pushes this, it's going to get ugly. He'll try to use your current situation against you. The fact that you're living in an apartment provided by someone else, that you have no job, no independent income. He'll say I'm unfit. He'll say whatever his lawyers tell him will work. But Isabella, you have something he doesn't. Luca's gaze was steady, unwavering. You have someone willing to testify that you're receiving support, that you have stable housing, that you're attending all medical appointments. You have documentation of his abandonment. And if necessary, you have me. Isabella looked at this man who'd inserted himself into her life with the force of a hurricane. This self-admitted criminal who'd shown her more kindness than her own husband ever had. Why are you really doing this? I told you why. Tell me again. Because I need to understand if this is about your sister, or if there's something else. Something you're not saying. Luca was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those dark, unreadable eyes. Then he stood and walked back to the windows, his back to her. My sister Sophia was the only good thing in my life for a very long time, he said quietly. Our father was a violent man who believed in the old ways, discipline through fear, respect through pain. Our mother died trying to escape him when I was 17 and Sophia was 12. After that, it was just the two of us trying to survive in a house that felt like a war zone. Isabella watched his reflection in the glass, saw the tension in his shoulders. I joined my father's organization to protect her, Luca continued. Learned the business, made myself valuable, eventually took over when he was no longer capable of leading. I built something bigger than he ever imagined, more profitable, more powerful, and I told myself I was doing it for Sophia, to give her a better life, to make sure she'd never want for anything. He turned back to face her, and there was rawness in his expression that took her breath away. But I was so focused on building an empire that I didn't see her falling apart. She met someone, a graduate student, charming, ambitious. He swept her off her feet, made promises he never intended to keep. When she got pregnant, he accused her of trying to trap him and disappeared. She was too ashamed to tell me, too afraid I'd react with violence, which I absolutely would have. His hands clenched briefly. She tried to handle it alone, found a cheap apartment, worked 2 jobs, convinced herself she could do it. By the time I found out, she was 7 months along and her blood pressure was through the roof. The preeclampsia, Isabella whispered. The doctors said if she'd been receiving proper care, they could have managed it, but she'd been skipping appointments because she couldn't afford them. When she finally collapsed at work, it was too late. They did an emergency C-section. Sophia died on the table. The baby, my niece, Elena Sophia, lived for 6 hours in the NICU. I held her the entire time, watched her take her last breath. Isabella's vision blurred with tears. I'm so sorry. I tell myself it wasn't my fault, that Sophia made her own choices. But the truth is, I created an environment where she felt she couldn't ask for help, where vulnerability was weakness. Luca's voice was rough now, stripped of its usual control. So when I saw you in that park, pregnant and alone and terrified, I saw a chance to do what I couldn't do for her, to make sure this time the story ends differently. I'm not your redemption, Isabella said gently. I know, and I'm not asking you to be. He moved back to the chair, sat down heavily. But if I can help you, if I can make sure your child has a chance that mine didn't, then maybe Sophia's death wasn't completely meaningless. They sat in silence for a long moment. Outside, the city hummed with its usual chaos. Inside, there was only the sound of breathing and the weight of shared grief. What happens now? Isabella asked finally. With Adrian? Now we wait. See if he follows through on his threats or if he's just posturing. Luca pulled out his phone again. I'm going to have security increased on the building. Discreet, but present. If Adrian shows up, I'll know about it. I don't want to live in fear. You won't. You'll live in safety. There's a difference. He stood. I should go. Let you rest. But Isabella, I need you to promise me something. What? If Adrian contacts you again, you tell me immediately. Don't try to handle him alone. Don't let him manipulate you into thinking you owe him anything. Luca's expression was fierce. You owe him nothing. Do you understand? Isabella nodded, not trusting her voice. At the door, Luca paused. The apartment across the hall is vacant. I'm thinking of having Elena move in there, just temporarily, so you have someone close if you need anything. You're moving your assistant into the building to watch over me. I'm ensuring you have support nearby. He smiled slightly. Elena's been looking for a place in the city anyway. This works for both of you. After he left, Isabella sat on the couch and processed everything she'd learned. Luca's sister, his niece, the guilt that drove him to help a stranger in a park. It made sense now, the intensity of his concern, the lavish support, the careful distance he maintained. He wasn't trying to control her. He was trying to save her the way he couldn't save Sophia. It should have made her feel better. Instead, it made her acutely aware of the weight of his expectations. She wasn't just Isabella Moreno anymore. She was a stand-in for the sister he'd lost, a chance for redemption that he'd never actually achieve. That night, she dreamed of a baby she'd never met, Elena Sofia de Luca, 6 hours old, dying in her uncle's arms. When she woke at 3 a.m., her face was wet with tears. Adrian called again 3 days later. Isabella let it go to voicemail. The message was short and clipped. We need to talk about the baby. I've hired a lawyer. Expect to hear from them. What? She forwarded the message to Luca without comment. His response came within minutes. Don't worry, I'll handle it. 2 days after that, a process server appeared at her door with divorce papers and a petition for full custody. Isabella signed for them with shaking hands and immediately called Luca. He was at her door within the hour, accompanied by a woman in her 50s with silver hair and eyes like flint. This is Margaret Chen, Luca said, the best family law attorney in New York. She's going to handle this. Margaret spread the papers across the dining table and read through them with professional efficiency. Standard intimidation tactics, she said after a few minutes. He's claiming abandonment, unfitness, inability to provide. He wants full custody with no visitation rights for you. Isabella felt her world tilt. He can't do that. He can file for it. He won't get it. Margaret looked up, her expression reassuring. Ms. Moreno, I've been practicing family law for 30 years. I've seen cases like this 100 times. The parent who walks away trying to come back when it's convenient. It rarely works in their favor. But he has money, resources. Had money. His severance is running out and he hasn't found new employment. Meanwhile, you have stable housing, regular medical care, and documentation of his abandonment. Margaret pulled out a legal pad and began making notes. We'll file a counterpetition. Seek to have his parental rights terminated based on abandonment with knowledge of potential pregnancy. We'll also petition for divorce on grounds of desertion and request full custody with no visitation or contact. Is that possible? Not only possible, but likely, especially when the court learns he left you while you were potentially pregnant, provided no support, and only returned when his other relationship failed. Margaret's smile was sharp. New York courts don't look kindly on that kind of behavior. Over the next 2 weeks, Isabella watched as Margaret Chen systematically dismantled Adrian's case. There were depositions where Isabella recounted the emails she'd sent him about her late period, bank records showing Adrian had closed their joint accounts without warning, testimony from Dr. Morrison about Isabella's excellent prenatal care and stable situation. And through it all, Luca remained present, but not intrusive. He attended strategy meetings when Margaret thought it would help. He ensured Isabella ate and slept and didn't drown in stress. But he never pushed, never demanded more than she was willing to give. Elena did move into the apartment across the hall, and her presence was surprisingly comforting. She'd appear in the evenings with homemade soup or fresh bread from a bakery she loved. She'd watch movies with Isabella when the silence got too heavy. She never pried, never asked invasive questions. She was just there. 3 weeks after Adrian filed for custody, he showed up at the building. Isabella was coming back from a walk when she saw him in the lobby, arguing with the doorman. He looked different than she remembered, thinner, with shadows under his eyes and a desperate edge to his movements. When he saw her, his expression shifted from frustration to something almost pleading. Bella, Please, I just want to talk. The doorman, Marcus, a kind man in his 60s who always greeted her warmly, stepped between them. Sir, you need to leave. You're not on the approved visitor list. I'm her husband, Adrian's voice rose. You can't keep me from talking to my own wife. Soon to be ex-husband, Isabella said, finding her voice. And yes, they can. This is private property. You're not welcome here. Adrian stared at her as if she were a stranger. What happened to you? You used to be sweet, accommodating. Now you're living in some luxury building, taking orders from... He looked around the expensive lobby. Who is he, Bella? Who's paying for all this? That's none of your business. It is if you're sleeping with someone while carrying my child. The accusation hung in the air like poison. Isabella felt heat rise to her cheeks, but before she could respond, a voice cut through the tension. That's quite an allegation to make without evidence, Mr. Cole. Luca appeared from the elevator, moving with that predatory grace that made him seem both civilized and dangerous. He wore a black suit today, perfectly cut, and his expression was cold enough to freeze blood. Adrian's face went pale. Who are you? Luca de Luca, and you are trespassing. Luca came to stand beside Isabella, not touching her but close enough that his presence felt protective. Ms. Moreno has made it clear you're not welcome. I suggest you leave before this becomes a legal matter. You're the one paying for all this. Adrian's voice dripped with contempt. What are you, some kind of sugar daddy, trading money for... He didn't finish the sentence. Luca moved faster than Isabella would have thought possible, closing the distance between them in 2 strides. He didn't touch Adrian, didn't raise his voice. He simply leaned in close and said something too quiet for Isabella to hear. Whatever it was, it drained the color from Adrian's face. He stumbled backward, nearly tripping over his own feet. You can't. I have rights. You have no rights. Luca's voice was still quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. You abandoned your wife when she was potentially pregnant. You provided no support, no contact, nothing. And now you show up making accusations and demands? He smiled, and it was terrifying. Your lawyer will receive a formal cease and desist by end of business today. If you contact Miss Moreno again, if you come within 500 feet of her, I will ensure you regret it. Do we understand each other? Adrian looked at Isabella, then back at Luca. Whatever he saw in Luca's eyes made him nod jerkily. Good. Marcus, please ensure Mr. Cole finds his way out. The doorman took Adrian's arm with surprising firmness and guided him toward the door. Adrian looked back once, his expression a mixture of fear and hatred. Then he was gone. Isabella realized she was shaking. Luca turned to her, his expression immediately softening. Are you all right? What did you say to him? The truth. That if he hurts you, I'll destroy him. Luca gestured toward the elevator. Come on, let's get you upstairs. In the apartment, Isabella paced while Luca called Margaret and relayed what had happened. When he hung up, his expression was grim. Margaret is filing for a restraining order, and we're accelerating the termination of parental rights petition. Adrian's behavior today will only help our case. He looked scared, Isabella said quietly. When you spoke to him, what exactly did you tell him? Luca was silent for a moment, then he sighed. I told him that I know about the embezzlement at VentureTech, the real reason he was forced out. And I told him that if he continues to harass you, those details will find their way to the district attorney's office. Was it true? Did he embezzle funds? According to my sources, yes, about $200,000 that was never accounted for. His severance package was essentially hush money to avoid prosecution. Luca met her eyes. I don't make idle threats, Isabella. If Adrian pushes this, I will use every resource at my disposal to protect you. That's blackmail. That's leverage, and sometimes leverage is the only language certain men understand. He moved to the window, looked out at the city. I know you want to handle this the right way, through legal channels, proper procedures, and we will. But I'm also ensuring Adrian understands the consequences of continued harassment. Isabella should be horrified, should be appalled by the casual way Luca wielded power and threats. Instead, she felt something closer to relief. For the first time in her adult life, someone was fighting for her. Not because she'd made herself small enough to deserve it, but because she mattered. Thank you, she said softly. Luca turned, surprise flickering across his features. For what? For being here. For standing up to him. For making me feel like I'm worth protecting. Something shifted in his expression. Warmth, maybe, or tenderness. You are worth protecting, Isabella. You always have been. Adrian just couldn't see it. They stood there looking at each other across the space of the beautiful apartment, and Isabella felt something crack open in her chest. Something that felt dangerous and warm and terrifying all at once. The moment broke when Luca's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned. I have to go. Business that can't wait. But Elena is across the hall if you need anything. And Isabella? He paused at the door. Call me if you're scared, or if you just need to hear a voice. Anytime, I mean that. After he left, Isabella sat on the couch and placed her hand on her stomach, where her baby was growing. At 14 weeks now, she was starting to show, just a small bump that made her regular clothes tight. Soon she'd need maternity wear. Soon there would be movement, kicks, the reality of a whole person forming inside her. She thought about Adrian's face when he'd seen her. The confusion and anger at finding her not broken but surviving, thriving even. He'd wanted her to be desperate, to come crawling back. Instead, she'd found something he couldn't give her: safety, support, the feeling of being valued. And it had come from the most unexpected source. A man who dealt in shadows and violence, who carried guilt like a second skin. A man who looked at her and saw someone worth saving. Isabella pulled out her phone and texted Luca. Thank you for today, for everything. I don't know how to repay you. His response came quickly. You don't repay kindness, you accept it and pass it forward when you can. That's how the world becomes a little less cruel. She read his words 3 times, then set the phone aside and went to the kitchen. There was chicken in the refrigerator, vegetables, pasta. She'd make dinner, something nourishing and warm. And maybe, just maybe, she'd invite Luca to share it. But when she picked up the phone to text him, she hesitated. This was becoming something more than protection, more than guilt-driven charity. She could feel it in the way her heart sped up when she saw his name on her screen, in the way his presence made her feel safe in a way she'd never experienced before. It was dangerous, complicated, probably a terrible idea. But her baby kicked for the first time that evening, a flutter so faint she almost missed it, and her first instinct was to call Luca and tell him. So she did. He answered on the first ring. Isabella, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong, The baby moved. For the first time, I felt it. The silence on the other end lasted just long enough that she thought he might have hung up. Then his voice came through, rough with emotion. That's wonderful. How did it feel? Like butterflies. Or bubbles. It was so faint I almost thought I imagined it. She laughed, surprised by the joy in her own voice. But it was real. The baby is real. Of course it's real. You've seen the ultrasounds. I know, but this is different. This is inside me. She struggled for words. This is my child. Yes, Luca said softly. It is, and you're going to be an incredible mother. They talked for an hour, about nothing and everything, about her day, his work, the strange journey that had brought them to this moment. And when they finally hung up, Isabella felt something shift inside her, something that had been closed and hardened beginning to soften. She was falling for Luca de Luca. The realization hit her like cold water. She was falling for a man who'd admitted to being a criminal, who wielded power with casual ease and threatened people without blinking, who carried the ghost of his dead sister like an open wound. It was the worst possible timing, the worst possible man, the worst possible situation. But her heart, apparently, didn't care about logic. The restraining order was granted 2 days later. Adrian was prohibited from contacting Isabella directly or indirectly, from coming within 500 feet of her residence, and from making any claims about the baby on social media or in public. Margaret presented the order with satisfaction. He's cornered now, she said. Either he walks away or he fights and risks exposure of the embezzlement. My money's on him walking away. She was right. A week later, Adrian's lawyer contacted Margaret with an offer. Adrian would sign away all parental rights in exchange for immunity from any future claims. The baby would not carry his name. He would have no contact, no visitation, no involvement whatsoever. In exchange, Isabella would never speak publicly about their relationship or his abandonment. Margaret brought the papers to the apartment for review. Isabella read them 3 times, her hands shaking. "This is it," she said. "If I sign this, he's gone. Forever." "Yes," Margaret confirmed. "He'll have no legal relationship to your child. You'll be free to make all decisions without his input or interference." Isabella looked at the ultrasound photo on her refrigerator, at the small bump visible beneath her shirt, at the life she was building from the ashes of her marriage. "Where do I sign?" She signed her name in 7 places. Margaret witnessed each signature, professional and efficient. When it was done, Margaret gathered the papers with satisfaction. "I'll file these with the court tomorrow. Within 30 days, the termination will be final. You'll be free of Adrian Cole permanently." After Margaret left, Isabella stood at the window and watched the city lights come on as evening fell. Free. She was going to be free. No more looking over her shoulder, no more fear that Adrian would appear and try to take her child. No more connection to the man who'd made her feel invisible. Her phone buzzed. "Luca. Margaret told me you signed. How are you feeling?" Isabella typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on the truth. Relieved, scared, free. All at once. "Would it help to talk about it?" "I can come by." She looked around the apartment, at the life he'd given her, at the safety he'd provided, at the future he'd made possible. "Yes. Please." He was there in 15 minutes, carrying a bag from her favorite Thai place. "I thought you might not have eaten," he said, setting containers on the counter. "And stress eating is better than not eating at all." They ate at the dining table, the food warm and comforting. Luca didn't push her to talk, didn't demand explanations. He just sat with her, present and solid and real. "I keep waiting to feel sad," Isabella said finally, "about the marriage ending, about Adrian being gone. But all I feel is relieved." "That's normal. You're allowed to be glad that someone who hurt you is out of your life. Does that make me a bad person?" "It makes you human." Luca set down his fork. "Isabella, you spent 3 years making yourself smaller to fit into Adrian's vision of what you should be. You sacrificed your career, your independence, your sense of self. And he repaid that by leaving when things got complicated. Being relieved that's over doesn't make you bad. It makes you sane." "Sophia would have liked you," Isabella said suddenly. Luca looked surprised. "Why do you say that?" "Because you see people. Really see them. Not who you want them to be or who they're pretending to be. Who they actually are." She met his eyes. "You saw me that night in the park. Saw past the fear and the pretending. And you've been seeing me ever since." "You make it easy," Luca said quietly. "You're not pretending anymore. You're just yourself. And that person is remarkable." The air between them felt charged, electric. Isabella's heart hammered against her ribs. This was dangerous territory, crossing lines that shouldn't be crossed. But she couldn't seem to stop herself. "Luca, I need to tell you something." "All right. I'm grateful for everything you've done. The apartment, the support, dealing with Adrian, all of it." She took a breath. "But this is becoming more than gratitude. And I don't know if that's okay, or if it complicates everything, or if I'm completely misreading." He kissed her. One moment they were sitting across from each other, and the next he was standing, pulling her up with him, his mouth on hers, with a desperate tenderness that made her forget how to breathe. His hands cupped her face, gentle despite the intensity, and she melted into him like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Luca rested his forehead against hers. "You're not misreading anything," he said roughly. "I've been trying so hard to keep my distance, to not let this become complicated. But Isabella, every time I see you, every time you smile or laugh or show that incredible strength, I fall a little more." "This is crazy," she whispered. "I'm pregnant with another man's child. You're you. This can't work." "Why not?" "Because," she struggled for words, "because I'm broken and messy, and I don't know how to trust anymore. Because you have this whole dangerous life I don't understand. Because you're afraid," Luca finished gently. "I know, so am I. But Isabella, I've spent 6 years letting fear and guilt control my life, letting Sophia's death define every choice I make. And then I met you, and for the first time I wanted something for myself. Not to make up for the past, not to ease guilt, just because being near you makes me feel human again. Isabella looked up at him, at the vulnerability in his dark eyes, and felt her last resistance crumble. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I, but maybe we can figure it out together. He kissed her forehead. No pressure, no expectations, just let's see where this goes. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and when he pulled her into his arms, she let herself lean into his strength, let herself feel safe and valued and maybe, just maybe, loved. Outside, the city hummed with its endless energy. But inside the apartment, there was only warmth and the quiet promise of something new beginning, something that felt a lot like hope. Luca didn't stay the night. He kissed her once more at the door, soft and lingering, and then he was gone, leaving Isabella standing in the middle of her apartment with her fingers pressed to her lips and her heart racing like she'd just run a marathon. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt his mouth on hers, his hands gentle on her face, the way he'd looked at her like she was something precious. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. She'd been married for 3 years and had never felt this kind of intensity. Adrian had been comfortable, predictable, safe in all the wrong ways. Luca was none of those things, and that should have sent her running. Instead, she found herself texting him at 2 a.m. Are you awake? The response came immediately. Always, can't sleep, too much thinking. Want company? I can be there in 10 minutes, Isabella smiled at her phone. No, I just wanted to know you were there. I'm always here. Try to rest. You need it. She fell asleep with the phone still in her hand, a small smile on her face. The next morning, Elena appeared at her door with fresh pastries and coffee that smelled like heaven. She took one look at Isabella's face and raised an eyebrow. Well, she said, stepping inside without invitation. Something's changed. Isabella felt heat rise to her cheeks. I don't know what you mean. Please, I've worked for Luca for 8 years. I know what he looks like when he's trying very hard not to care about someone, and I know what you look like right now. Elena set the pastries on the counter. So, are we going to talk about it, or are we going to pretend nothing happened? There's nothing to talk about. He kissed you. Isabella's head snapped up. How did you... He called me last night at midnight, asking if it was completely insane to get involved with a pregnant woman he was supposed to be protecting. Elena poured coffee into 2 mugs with practiced efficiency. I told him it was probably the sanest thing he's done in years. Elena, this is complicated. I'm pregnant with another man's child. Luca is... He's a man who's been half dead since his sister died, and you're the first person who's made him feel alive again. Elena handed her a mug. Yes, it's complicated. Yes, the timing is terrible. But Isabella, I've watched Luca for 8 years build walls so high and thick that no one could get through. You scaled them in a matter of weeks. I didn't do anything. You were yourself. You let him help you. You didn't try to use him or manipulate him or play games. You just accepted his help with grace and tried to build a life. Elena sipped her coffee. Do you have any idea how rare that is in our world? Your world, Isabella corrected. I'm not part of whatever Luca does. No, and he'd kill to keep it that way. Elena's expression grew serious. But you need to understand something. Luca's business is dangerous. There are people who would love to find a weakness they could exploit. If they discover you mean something to him, then I become a target. Isabella set down her mug, her stomach churning. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe we should just... No. Elena's voice was firm. Don't you dare let fear stop you from living. Luca has the best security in the city. You're safer with him than you've ever been. But you need to be aware, need to be careful. Isabella's hand went to her stomach, protective. I can't put my baby at risk. You won't. Luca would burn the city down before he let anything happen to you or your child. Elena's expression softened. He's already started adoption proceedings. The words hit like a physical blow. What? He didn't tell you. He contacted Margaret Chen 2 days ago. Asked her to prepare paperwork to legally adopt your baby once it's born. If you're willing, of course. Isabella couldn't breathe. He can't. We haven't even... This is moving too fast. Is it? Or is it exactly the speed it needs to move? Elena stood, collected her purse. Think about it. But Isabella, that man has never wanted to be a father, never allowed himself to imagine it. And now he's preparing to adopt a child that isn't biologically his because he can't imagine a world where your baby doesn't have his protection and his name. After Elena left, Isabella sat motionless for a long time. Adoption. Luca wanted to adopt her baby, wanted to be a father to a child conceived by another man, wanted to tie himself to her in the most permanent way possible. It was too much, too fast, too everything. Her phone rang. Luca's name appeared on the screen. She answered on the third ring. Elena has a big mouth, he said without preamble. She's concerned about me. So am I, which is why I'm calling to apologize for moving too fast. The adoption idea, I shouldn't have started that process without talking to you first. Isabella closed her eyes. Why do you want to adopt my baby? Silence stretched between them. Then Luca's voice came through, rough and honest. Because that child deserves a father, a real one, not someone who abandoned them before they were even born. And because I look at your ultrasound photo on the refrigerator, and I think about teaching them to ride a bike, to read, to navigate this insane city. I think about being there for their first day of school and their graduation and all the moments in between. And I want that. I want to be that person for them. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're strong and brave and you make terrible coffee, but excellent pasta. I know you read mystery novels and hate mornings, and you cry during commercials about dogs. I know you've been hurt and you're trying so hard to rebuild your life. And I know that when I'm with you, I don't feel like I'm just existing anymore. I feel like I'm actually living. Tears streamed down Isabella's face. This is crazy, Luca. Completely insane, he agreed. But I meant what I said last night. No pressure, no expectations. If you're not ready for this, for any of this, I'll back off. The apartment is still yours. The support is still there. But Isabella, I need you to know that I'm all in, completely. Whenever you're ready. What if I'm never ready? Then I'll wait. His voice was steady, certain. However long it takes. Isabella wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I have a doctor's appointment next week. The anatomy scan. They can tell if it's a boy or girl. Would you like me to come with you? The question was careful, giving her space to say no. But Isabella found herself nodding even though he couldn't see it. Yes, I'd like that very much. Then I'll be there. They talked for another hour about nothing important, about the weather and the book she was reading and the restaurant Luca was thinking of trying. Normal, mundane things that felt extraordinary simply because they were sharing them. When they finally hung up, Isabella felt lighter than she had in months. Maybe this was crazy. Maybe it would all fall apart. But for the first time since Adrian had left, she felt like she was choosing her own future instead of just surviving the one thrust upon her. The days leading up to the appointment passed in a blur of anticipation and nerves. Isabella's bump was pronounced now at 19 weeks. Impossible to hide beneath her clothes. She'd gone shopping with Elena for maternity wear and come home with bags full of soft fabrics and expandable waistbands that made her actually look pregnant instead of just bloated. Luca called every evening. Sometimes they talked for hours, sometimes just for a few minutes. But the consistency of it, the reliability, was its own kind of comfort. He was there, solid and present and real. The morning of the appointment, Isabella woke to find a text from him. I'll pick you up at 9:30. Wear comfortable shoes. I have a surprise after the appointment. She was ready at 9:15, dressed in a soft blue maternity dress that Elena had insisted made her eyes look like sapphires. When Luca knocked at 9:25, her heart did that ridiculous fluttering thing it had been doing since their kiss. He looked devastating in dark jeans and a black sweater, his hair slightly mussed as if he'd been running his hands through it. When he saw her, his expression softened into something that made her knees weak. You look beautiful, he said simply. I look pregnant. Yes, and beautiful. He offered his arm. Ready? The drive to Dr. Morrison's office was filled with easy conversation. Luca told her about the restaurant he was renovating in Soho, his plans to turn it into something that served authentic Northern Italian cuisine. Isabella told him about the freelance editing work she'd started taking on, small projects but enough to make her feel productive. In the waiting room, Luca sat beside her, his presence drawing subtle attention from the other patients. He had that quality, the ability to command a room without saying a word. But with Isabella, he was gentle, attentive, asking if she needed water or if she was comfortable. When the nurse called her name, Luca stood with her. "Is it okay if I come in?" Isabella's throat tightened. "Please." Dr. Morrison greeted them warmly and didn't comment on Luca's presence beyond a friendly handshake. The ultrasound began with the usual routine: measurements, checking development, listening to the heartbeat that still made Isabella's breath catch. "Everything looks perfect," Dr. Morrison said. "Growth is right on track. Heart, spine, brain, all developing beautifully." She paused, moving the wand slightly. "Would you like to know the sex?" Isabella looked at Luca. He was staring at the monitor with an expression of wonder that transformed his usually controlled features into something raw and vulnerable. "Yes," Isabella said. "We'd like to know." Dr. Morrison smiled. "Congratulations, you're having a girl." The world stopped. A girl. She was having a daughter. Isabella felt tears stream down her face as she stared at the grainy image on the screen. This tiny person with a heartbeat and fingers and toes and a whole life ahead of her. Luca's hand found hers squeezed gently. When she looked at him, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "A girl," he whispered. "A beautiful baby girl." Dr. Morrison printed several photos and gave them privacy to compose themselves. When they were alone, Luca pulled Isabella into his arms, careful of her stomach, and just held her. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for letting me be here for this. Thank you for wanting to be here." They stayed like that for a long moment, the ultrasound photos scattered on the examination table, the sound of the baby's heartbeat still echoing in Isabella's ears. In the car afterward, Luca drove through the city with purpose. Isabella watched the buildings slide past, not asking where they were going. She trusted him. The realization hit her with startling clarity. After everything Adrian had done to destroy her trust, she'd somehow found it again with a man who should terrify her but instead made her feel safe. They pulled up in front of a brownstone in the West Village, the kind of building that dripped with old money and careful restoration. Luca helped her out of the car and led her up the steps to a blue door with a brass knocker shaped like a lion. "Where are we?" she asked. "Somewhere I should have shown you weeks ago." He knocked, and the door opened to reveal an older woman with silver hair and kind eyes. "Isabella, this is Maria. She was Sophia's godmother and my mother's best friend. Maria, this is Isabella Moreno." Maria's smile was warm as she ushered them inside. The brownstone was gorgeous. Exposed brick, vintage furniture, and family photos covering every surface. Maria led them to a sun-filled living room and gestured for them to sit. "Luca told me about you," Maria said, her accent thick with Italian vowels. "About the baby. I'm so happy for you both." "We're not," Isabella started, but Maria waved her off. "You will be. I see how he looks at you. The same way his father looked at his mother before the anger took him." She patted Luca's hand affectionately. "Now, I have something for you." She disappeared into another room and returned carrying a wooden box worn smooth with age. She set it on the coffee table and opened it carefully. Inside were baby clothes. Tiny, delicate garments hand-sewn with obvious love. There were blankets and booties and a christening gown so beautiful it took Isabella's breath away. "These were Sophia's," Maria said softly. "Her mother made them before she was born, and Sophia always said that if she had a daughter, she'd pass them down." She looked at Isabella with eyes full of warmth. "I think she'd want your little girl to have them." Isabella's vision blurred. "I can't. These are too precious. They're meant to be used, not stored away collecting dust." Maria pressed the box into her hands. "Babies should be wrapped in love, yes? These clothes carry so much love." Luca's hand was on Isabella's back, steady and grounding. She looked at him through her tears and saw his own eyes were wet. "Thank you, Maria," he said, his voice thick. "This means everything." They stayed for an hour, drinking tea and eating Maria's homemade biscotti while she told stories about Sophia as a child, about her kindness and her terrible singing voice, and her dreams of becoming a teacher. The stories were bittersweet but beautiful, and Isabella felt honored to be trusted with them. When they finally left, Isabella carried the box of baby clothes like it was made of glass. In the car, Luca was quiet, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. "Are you okay?" Isabella asked. I haven't been to see Maria since Sophia died, he said quietly. I couldn't face her. Couldn't face anyone who reminded me of what I'd lost. But today, showing her that you're having a girl, seeing her smile again. He trailed off. Thank you for coming with me. Thank you for sharing this with me, for trusting me with Sophia's memory. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and what she saw in his eyes made her heart stutter. Isabella, I need to tell you something. Okay. I'm falling in love with you. The words were raw, honest, stripped of any pretense. I've been fighting it since that night in the park, telling myself it was just guilt or obligation or the need to fix what happened with Sophia. But it's not. It's you. The way you laugh at terrible jokes and the way you cry at ultrasounds and the way you're building a whole new life from absolutely nothing. You're extraordinary, and I'm falling in love with you. Isabella couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. All she could do was stare at this man who'd saved her in so many ways, who'd given her safety and support, and now his heart. You don't have to say anything, Luca continued. I'm not asking for a response or putting pressure on you. I just needed you to know, because we're having a daughter. We? The word escaped before she could stop it. If you'll let me. If you'll let me be her father, not because of obligation or guilt, but because I can't imagine not being part of her life, part of your life. He pulled the car over, turned to face her fully. Isabella, I want to be there for every moment, every midnight feeding, every diaper change, every first. I want to teach her to be brave like her mother. I want to give her the childhood Sophia never got to give her own daughter. I want... His voice broke. I want to be a family. The tears came then, hot and fast. Isabella launched herself across the console and kissed him with everything she had. All the fear and hope and desperate longing that had been building since that night in the park poured into the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both gasping, she pressed her forehead to his. I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered, and it terrifies me. Why? Because last time I loved someone, they destroyed me. Because you're supposed to be dangerous and wrong and everything I should run from. Because this is all happening so fast, and I'm afraid that if I let myself believe in it, it'll disappear. Luca cupped her face in his hands, his touch infinitely gentle. I can't promise I won't hurt you. I'm human, and humans make mistakes. But I can promise that I will never abandon you, never make you feel invisible, never put anything above you and our daughter. You're not a convenience or a placeholder. You're everything. Our daughter, Isabella repeated, testing the words. You really want to adopt her? More than I've ever wanted anything. I want her to have my name, my protection, my love. I want to be her father in every way that matters. He kissed her softly. But only if that's what you want. What I want is terrifying. Tell me anyway. Isabella took a shaky breath. I want you to be there when she's born. I want you to walk her to her first day of school and teach her to ride a bike and scare away her first boyfriend. I want to wake up next to you and fall asleep in your arms and build something real that doesn't fall apart when things get hard. I want... Her voice broke. I want to be a family too. The kiss that followed was different from the others. Slower, deeper, full of promise and possibility. When they finally pulled apart, Luca was smiling, a real smile that transformed his entire face. So we're doing this? He asked. Really doing this? I think we've been doing this since you stepped out of the shadows in that park. Isabella laughed through her tears. I was just too scared to admit it. Not scared, careful. There's a difference. He brushed a tear from her cheek. And I love that about you. You don't trust blindly. You make people earn it. They drove back to her apartment in comfortable silence, hands linked across the console. When they arrived, Luca carried the box of baby clothes upstairs and set it carefully in the empty second bedroom. We should start thinking about the nursery, he said, looking around the bare space. What colors do you like? You're really ready to jump into this? Isabella, I've been ready since the moment I saw you on that bench. He pulled her close, one hand resting on her bump. Besides, we only have a few months. July will be here before we know it. They spent the evening looking at nursery ideas on his phone, debating between soft pastels and bold colors, traditional furniture and modern designs. It felt surreal and perfect, and utterly domestic in a way that made Isabella's heart ache with happiness. When Luca finally left, late, after kissing her senseless against the door, Isabella stood in the empty nursery and imagined it filled with life. A crib in the corner, a rocking chair by the window, shelves full of books and toys, and Luca standing in the middle of it all, holding their daughter with the same wonder she'd seen on his face during the ultrasound. Their daughter, not Adrian's, theirs. She placed her hand on her stomach, feeling the gentle flutter of movement. "You're going to have an amazing father," she whispered. "Someone who chose you, who wanted you before you were even born, who'll love you with everything he has." The baby kicked in response, and Isabella laughed through fresh tears. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The next few weeks passed in a haze of happiness Isabella had never experienced before. Luca was there constantly, but never suffocatingly. He'd appear in the evenings with groceries or takeout, help her put together the furniture they'd ordered for the nursery, read parenting books with the same intensity he probably brought to his business dealings. Elena had become a true friend, helping Isabella prepare for motherhood with practical advice and dark humor. They'd go shopping for baby essentials, Elena steering her away from unnecessary gadgets and toward the things she'd actually need. "Forget the wipe warmer," Elena said one afternoon at Bye Bye Baby. "You need good bottles, a comfortable nursing chair, and approximately 6,000 muslin blankets." 6,000! Babies are disgusting, darling. They leak from every orifice at the most inconvenient times. You can never have too many muslin blankets. Isabella laughed, the sound coming easier these days. She felt lighter, freer, like she'd been carrying a weight for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. At 25 weeks, her belly was pronounced enough that strangers offered her seats on the subway. She'd started to feel the baby move regularly, rolls and kicks that were getting stronger every day. And every time, her first instinct was to tell Luca. He'd placed his hand on her stomach one evening while they were watching a movie, and the baby had kicked directly into his palm. The expression on his face, pure joy mixed with wonder, was something Isabella would remember for the rest of her life. "She knows me," he'd whispered. "Of course she does. You talk to her every day." It was true. Luca had taken to speaking to Isabella's belly whenever they were together, telling the baby about his day, about the restaurant he was renovating, about the city she'd grow up in. It was adorable and endearing, and made Isabella fall deeper in love with him every single day. The adoption paperwork was filed at 28 weeks. Margaret had prepared everything meticulously, and when Isabella signed her name giving Luca permission to adopt her daughter, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "It'll be finalized shortly after she's born," Margaret explained. "We'll file the birth certificate with Luca listed as father, and the adoption will be processed within weeks. Legally, she'll be a DeLuca from the start." A DeLuca. Their daughter would carry Luca's name, his protection, his legacy. It was overwhelming and perfect all at once. That night, lying in bed with Luca's arms around her and his hand on her belly, Isabella finally asked the question that had been nagging at her. "Do you ever worry that people in your world will use her against you? Use us?" She felt him tense behind her. "Every day. But you're not backing away." "No, because backing away doesn't make you safer. It just makes you alone." He kissed her shoulder. "I've increased security. The building has been thoroughly vetted. Everyone who works there has been background checked. And I have people watching for any threats, any indication that someone might try to use you to get to me." "That sounds exhausting." "It's necessary. And Isabella, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "If anything ever feels wrong, if someone approaches you, if you notice anything unusual, you tell me immediately, no matter how small it seems." Isabella turned in his arms to face him. "You're scaring me. I'm being realistic. My world is dangerous. I won't lie to you about that. But I'm also very good at keeping the people I love safe." He stroked her cheek. "I just need you to trust me and be aware." "I trust you, completely." "Then we'll be fine." But Isabella could see the worry in his eyes, could feel the tension in his body. Whatever dangers lurked in Luca's world, they were real and present. And now, by loving him, by carrying his daughter, she'd become part of that world too. It should have terrified her. Maybe it would have, 6 months ago. But now, with Luca's arms around her and their daughter moving beneath her ribs, she felt only determination. They'd made it this far. They'd survived Adrian, the uncertainty, the fear. They'd built something real and solid and worth protecting. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. And that was enough. The threat came on a Tuesday morning in early June, when Isabella was 34 weeks pregnant and so tired of being huge that she'd started measuring time in days until her due date rather than weeks. She'd woken to use the bathroom for the third time that night and was shuffling back to bed when her phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. The message was simple and chilling. Beautiful apartment. Shame if something happened to it. Tell DeLuca we need to talk. Isabella's blood ran cold. She grabbed the phone with shaking hands and immediately called Luca. He answered before the second ring, alert despite the 3 a.m. hour. What's wrong? She read him the message, her voice trembling. There was a beat of silence, then she heard movement, the rustle of clothes. I'm coming over. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me. His voice was controlled, but she could hear the fury beneath it. I'll be there in 5 minutes. He made it in 4. Isabella heard his key in the lock. He'd had one for weeks now, and then he was there, pulling her into his arms, his hands running over her as if checking for injuries. I'm okay, she said against his chest. It was just a text. Just a text. He pulled back, his expression dark. Someone found you, found this place. They're threatening you to get to me. Who would do that? Luca's jaw tightened. I have an idea. There's been tension with one of the other organizations. Territory disputes, the usual power plays. I thought I had it contained, but apparently not. He pulled out his phone, typed something rapidly. I'm having security doubled on the building, and I'm moving you. What? No, this is my home. This is a location they know about, which makes it unsafe. His tone left no room for argument. There's a penthouse in Tribeca. Top floor, private elevator, security that would make Fort Knox jealous. You're moving there tonight. Luca, I can't just... Yes, you can. Because in 5 weeks, you're going to have a baby. My baby. Our daughter. And I will not risk either of you being used as leverage against me. He cupped her face, his touch gentle despite the steel in his voice. Please, Isabella, don't fight me on this. She saw the fear in his eyes, real fear, not the controlled concern he usually showed. Someone had threatened her, had found where she lived, had made it clear they knew exactly how to hurt him. Okay, she whispered. We'll move. The relief on his face was palpable. Thank you. Elena will help you pack tomorrow. For tonight, I'm staying here. You don't have to... I'm staying. His voice was firm. I'm not leaving you alone. Not now. They went back to bed, but neither slept. Luca held her close, one hand on her belly where their daughter kicked and rolled, oblivious to the danger swirling around them. Isabella could feel the tension in his body, the protective fury he was barely containing. Who sent the message? She asked quietly. A man named Vincent Russo. Runs an organization that's been trying to expand into my territory for months. I've been handling it through negotiations, trying to avoid bloodshed. But apparently, he's decided to escalate. What does he want? Power. Money. The usual things men like us fight over. Luca's voice was bitter. I've spent years building something more sophisticated than my father's old operation. Legitimate businesses mixed with the less legitimate. I thought I could modernize, move away from the violence, but men like Russo only understand force. What are you going to do? Whatever I have to do to keep you safe. He kissed her forehead. But first, I'm getting you somewhere he can't reach. The penthouse was stunning. 32nd floor of a pre-war building in Tribeca, with floor-to-ceiling windows, exposed brick, and a level of luxury that made the Murray Hill apartment look modest. There was a nursery already set up. Luca had been planning this move for weeks, she realized, just waiting for the right moment. How long have you been preparing this? Isabella asked, running her hand over the crib rail. Since the first threat came in 3 weeks ago. Luca had the grace to look slightly guilty. I didn't want to worry you, but I've been working with Russo, trying to find a peaceful solution. When that failed, I started making contingency plans. You should have told me. I know. I'm sorry. I was trying to handle it without dragging you into my world more than necessary. He moved to stand beside her, looking down at the crib. But you're right. We're partners. I should have been honest. Isabella turned to face him, took his hands in hers. No more secrets. Whatever's happening, we face it together. Together, he agreed. Starting with a meeting I have with Russo tomorrow. He's agreed to talk. I'm going to make it very clear that you're off limits. And if he doesn't agree? Luca's expression went cold. Then he'll discover why people don't cross me. The meeting took place in neutral territory, a private room at an upscale restaurant in Midtown. Luca had insisted Isabella stay at the penthouse with Elena and two armed guards he trusted implicitly. She'd wanted to argue, but the fierce protectiveness in his eyes stopped her. I'll call you the moment it's over, he'd promised, kissing her thoroughly. Stay safe. Both of you. She'd watched him leave in a tailored charcoal suit that made him look like death in designer clothing, and prayed this would end without violence. The call came 2 hours later. Luca's voice was tight with controlled rage. It's handled. Russo has agreed to back off. You're safe. What did you do? What I had to do. I'll explain when I get home. He paused. Isabella, there's something else. Adrian resurfaced. Her heart stopped. What? Russo contacted him, offered him money to testify that you're an unfit mother, that you're involved with a criminal, that the baby would be in danger. Adrian agreed. The betrayal shouldn't have surprised her, but it did. He signed away his rights, and apparently regrets it now that there's money involved. Russo was going to use Adrian's testimony to bring child services into this, create a mess that would force me to choose between you and my organization. Luca's voice was ice. But I took care of it. How? I reminded Adrian that his embezzlement is well documented, and I reminded Russo that I have enough evidence of his illegal activities to put him away for 20 years. Luca's tone softened slightly. They've both backed down. You're safe. The baby is safe. It's over. Isabella sank onto the couch, one hand on her massive belly. Just like that? Not quite that simple. There were negotiations, agreements. But yes, it's over. Russo is pulling back to his original territory. Adrian has disappeared. I suspect he's left the city entirely, and you and our daughter are protected. Relief flooded through her so intensely she felt dizzy. When will you be home? 20 minutes? I need to see you, touch you, make sure you're really okay. When he arrived, Isabella was waiting by the door. He pulled her into his arms the moment he stepped inside, holding her as if she might disappear. She felt him shaking slightly, the adrenaline and fear finally catching up to him. I thought I might lose you, he said roughly. When Russo mentioned Adrian, when I realized how vulnerable you were, I thought, but you didn't. You protected us. She pulled back to look at him. Luca, I need to know. Did you hurt anyone? No. I made it clear I would if they pushed, but it didn't come to that. Violence was my father's way. I prefer leverage and information. His smile was grim, though I won't pretend I wasn't tempted. I love you, Isabella said, the words flowing easily now. And I trust you, but I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me that you'll always choose us over your business. That if it comes down to your empire or your family, you'll choose family. Luca cupped her face in his hands, his dark eyes fierce with conviction. I already have. The moment I saw you in that park, the moment I decided to help you, I chose family over everything else. My business matters, yes, but you and our daughter, you're everything. That night, they lay in bed in their new home, and Luca talked about the future, about selling off the less legitimate parts of his operation, focusing on the restaurants and real estate he'd been building, about becoming the kind of man their daughter could be proud of. I want her to know what I do, he said, not hide it or pretend I'm something I'm not, but I want to be able to explain it without shame, without fear that she'll grow up afraid of her own father. She won't be afraid of you. She'll love you, just like I do. He kissed her then, slow and sweet, his hand resting on her belly where their daughter kicked steadily. I can't wait to meet her. 3 more weeks, if she's on time. She'll be early. Strong-willed women always are. Isabella laughed, and the sound filled the beautiful penthouse with warmth. They'd survived so much: abandonment, threats, fear. They'd built something solid from the ashes of her broken marriage and his crushing guilt, and now they were about to become a family. 2 weeks later, at 36 weeks and 3 days, Isabella's water broke during dinner. One moment she was eating the pasta Luca had made, the next she was standing in a puddle staring at him with wide eyes. "That's not supposed to happen yet," she said inanely. Luca was already moving, grabbing the hospital bag they'd packed weeks ago, calling the car service, helping her change clothes with efficient calm. But she could see the barely controlled panic in his eyes. "It's okay," she said, gripping his hand through a contraction. "Women have babies early all the time. She's just impatient." "Like her mother," Luca said, and despite everything, he smiled. The hospital was a blur of activity. Dr. Morrison was called, labor progressed faster than expected, and before Isabella knew it, she was being told to push. Luca stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering encouragement even when she cursed him for getting her pregnant in the first place. "I didn't get you pregnant," he said, amused despite the situation. "That was Adrian's doing." "You're here, so you're getting blamed," she panted. "That's how this works." And then, after what felt like hours but was actually only 47 minutes of active labor, there was a cry, high and indignant and absolutely perfect. "It's a girl," Dr. Morrison announced, though they'd known that for months. A beautiful, healthy girl. They placed her on Isabella's chest, and the world stopped. She was tiny and perfect, with dark hair plastered to her head and eyes that seemed to look right into Isabella's soul. She was real. After months of fear and hope and preparation, she was finally real. "Hi, baby," Isabella whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hi, sweet girl. We've been waiting for you." Luca stood beside the bed, staring at their daughter with an expression of such profound wonder that Isabella's heart cracked open. When the nurses took the baby to clean her and check her vitals, he sat on the edge of the bed and pulled Isabella close. "She's perfect," he said roughly. "Absolutely perfect." "She is." Isabella wiped her eyes. "What should we name her?" They'd discussed names for weeks but never settled on one. Now, looking at their daughter, pink and healthy and already showing signs of a temper, Isabella knew exactly what felt right. "Sophia," she said. "Sophia, Claire de Luca." Luca's breath caught. "After my sister?" "She brought us together in a way. Your love for her, your grief. It changed you. Made you the man who could see me in that park and decide to help." Isabella touched his face. "Sophia deserves to be remembered, and I think your sister would love knowing her name lives on." "Claire." His voice was thick with emotion. "It means bright, clear, a fresh start." Isabella smiled through her tears. "Sophia Claire, our bright new beginning." The nurses brought the baby back, now cleaned and wrapped in a soft pink blanket. Luca held out his arms and they placed her carefully in his embrace. He looked down at his daughter because she was his, legally and in every way that mattered. And Isabella watched something fundamental shift in his expression. "Hello, Sophia Claire," he whispered. "I'm your papa, and I promise you I will spend every day of my life making sure you're safe and loved and happy. You're my second chance, my redemption, my everything." The baby yawned, tiny and perfect, and Luca laughed through his tears. Isabella had never seen anything more beautiful. They stayed in the hospital for 2 days, learning how to feed and change and soothe the newborn who had very strong opinions about everything. Luca barely left their side, sleeping in the uncomfortable chair by Isabella's bed, jumping up at every sound Sophia made. Elena visited with flowers and impractical baby clothes that were too expensive and too beautiful not to use. Maria came with more of Sophia's baby things and blessed the baby with prayers in Italian that made Luca's eyes shine with tears. And Margaret arrived with paperwork, the birth certificate listing Luca de Luca as father, and the finalized adoption papers that would make it official. "Sign here," Margaret said, professional as always, but with a smile that suggested she was genuinely happy for them. "And here. And congratulations. As of this moment, Sophia Claire de Luca is legally your daughter." Luca signed his name with a hand that trembled slightly. When it was done, he looked at Isabella with so much love it took her breath away. "We're a family," he said simply. We're a family, she agreed. Going home was surreal. The penthouse had been transformed while they were at the hospital. More baby supplies, a meal delivery service stocked for weeks, and a night nurse who would help for the first month. Luca had thought of everything. That first night, they stood together in the nursery watching Sophia sleep in her crib. She was so tiny, so fragile, and yet she'd already changed everything. I never thought I'd have this, Luca said quietly. A family, a daughter, someone who looks at me and sees a father instead of a criminal. You're both, Isabella said honestly, but the father part is what matters to her, to us. He pulled her close, careful not to press on her still healing body. I meant what I said in the hospital, about being a better man. I've started the process of selling off the questionable parts of my business. Within a year, I'll be completely legitimate. You don't have to do that for me. I'm doing it for Sophia, and for you, and for myself. He looked down at their sleeping daughter. I want to be someone she can be proud of, someone who doesn't have to hide what he does for a living. Over the next few weeks, they settled into a rhythm. Sleepless nights and constant feedings, learning to read Sophia's different cries, marveling at every tiny change. Luca was a natural father, patient and gentle and completely besotted with his daughter. He'd sit for hours with her on his chest, talking softly in Italian, telling her about the city she'd grow up in and the adventures they'd have together. Isabella watched him transform from the controlled, dangerous man she'd met in the park into someone softer, more open. He still had that edge, that quiet authority. But with Sophia, he was tender in ways that made Isabella fall in love with him all over again. One evening, when Sophia was 6 weeks old and finally sleeping for longer stretches, Luca found Isabella standing at the window, looking out at the city lights. He came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "That night in the park. How completely hopeless everything felt. How I was convinced my life was over." She turned in his arms to face him. "I thought I was sitting there waiting for the world to end. Instead, I was waiting for it to begin." "You saved yourself," Luca said. "I just provided the tools." "No, we saved each other." Isabella kissed him softly. "You gave me safety and support. I gave you a reason to be someone better. We built this together." From the nursery came a small cry. Sophia, waking up hungry. They both smiled, the sound no longer causing panic, but instead a kind of tired acceptance. "Your turn," Isabella said. "Our turn," Luca corrected, taking her hand. They walked together to the nursery where their daughter waited. Luca picked her up with practiced ease while Isabella settled into the rocking chair. As Sophia nursed, Luca sat on the floor beside them, his hand on Isabella's knee, watching his family with an expression of complete contentment. This was it, Isabella thought. This was what happiness looked like. Not the fairy tale version with perfect circumstances and easy answers, but the real version, built from struggle and choice and two broken people deciding to be whole together. 6 months later, on a crisp December evening, Luca proposed properly. He took Isabella to the park where they'd first met, to the bench where she'd sat alone and terrified. Sophia was bundled against the cold in Luca's arms, watching the world with curious dark eyes that matched her father's. "I've been thinking about this moment since the night I met you," Luca said, setting Sophia carefully in her stroller before getting down on one knee. "I've tried 100 times to find the right words, something that would capture what you mean to me, what you've given me. But every time I come back to something simple." He pulled out a ring, vintage, with a center stone that caught the streetlight and sparkled like captured fire. "This was my mother's. The one thing she left behind that my father didn't destroy. I've kept it for years, never imagining I'd have someone to give it to, but Isabella, you've given me everything. A family, a purpose, a future worth building. Will you marry me?" Isabella looked at this man who'd saved her when she was broken, who'd chosen her and her child when he could have walked away, who'd built a life with her from absolutely nothing. Then she looked at their daughter, perfect and healthy, and loved beyond measure. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, absolutely yes." The ring fit perfectly. Luca stood and kissed her as if they were the only two people in the city, as if the park bench held only good memories now. Sophia made a happy noise from her stroller, and they broke apart laughing. "She approves," Luca said. "Of course she does. She's smart like her mother." They walked through the park together, a family now in every sense that mattered. Luca pushed the stroller while Isabella held his other hand, and they talked about the future, about the wedding they'd planned for spring, about the restaurant Luca was opening that would be completely legitimate, funded entirely by clean money, about the editing business Isabella had been building from home, about giving Sophia siblings someday, when they were ready, about all the beautiful, ordinary things that made up a life. When they got home, Elena was waiting with champagne and sparkling cider. She'd known about the proposal, had helped Luca plan it, and her delight was genuine. "Welcome to the family officially," she said, hugging Isabella. "Though really, you've been family since the moment Luca called me at midnight asking if he was insane for wanting to help you." "And what did you tell him?" Isabella asked. "That he was completely insane, and that he should do it anyway." Elena smiled. "Best advice I ever gave." That night, after Sophia was asleep and Elena had gone home, Isabella and Luca stood in their bedroom and looked at the ring on her finger, at the life they'd built, at the future stretching out before them. "Do you ever regret it?" Isabella asked. "Taking on a pregnant stranger with more problems than solutions?" "Every single day," Luca said, and when she looked at him in shock, he grinned. "I regret that I didn't find you sooner, that you had to go through everything with Adrian alone, that it took me 35 years to discover what actually matters in life. And what's that? This." He gestured to the apartment, to the nursery where their daughter slept. "Family, love, building something that lasts beyond money and power. You taught me that. You and Sophia." Isabella pulled him close, buried her face in his chest. "I love you. So much it scares me sometimes." "Good, because I love you just as much, and I plan on spending the rest of my life proving it." They got married in April, in a small ceremony at the restaurant Luca had renovated. Maria cried through the entire thing. Elena served as maid of honor, and Sophia, 9 months old and determined to be the center of attention, babbled happily through the vows. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Luca kissed Isabella like they were the only two people in the world, like every moment of pain and fear had been worth it to arrive at this perfect ending that was really just the beginning. The reception was small and intimate, close friends, and the people who'd helped them build this life. No one from Adrian's world, no one from Luca's old business, just the people who mattered, celebrating love that had been forged in the darkness and emerged stronger for it. Isabella danced with her husband while their daughter slept in Maria's arms, and thought about the pregnancy test that had started everything, the moment of absolute desperation that had led her to a park bench at midnight, the stranger who'd stepped from the shadows and decided she was worth saving. She wasn't saved, though. She'd been seen, and that had made all the difference. Years later, when Sophia was old enough to ask how her parents met, they told her the truth about the park bench and the pregnancy test, about courage and kindness and two broken people choosing to be whole together, about how sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually doorways to everything we never knew we needed. "So you found each other when you were both sad?" Sophia asked, her dark eyes, so like Luca's, wide with understanding beyond her years. "We found each other when we were both ready to be found," Isabella corrected gently, "and we built something beautiful together." "That's the best kind of love story," Sophia declared with the certainty of a child who'd only ever known security and adoration. "The ones where people choose each other." She was right, of course, because that's exactly what they'd done. Chosen each other when they could have walked away, chosen family over fear, chosen love over the safety of staying closed off and alone. And every day, they chose it again. That night, after Sophia was asleep and the house was quiet, Luca found Isabella standing at the window of their bedroom, a different apartment now, a townhouse in Brooklyn they'd bought together, with a backyard for Sophia to play in and room to grow. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, pulling her back against his chest. "Everything, nothing. How impossibly lucky I am." "We are," he corrected. "We're impossibly lucky, both of us." Isabella turned in his arms, looked up at the man who'd seen her when she was invisible, who'd given her safety when she was drowning, who'd chosen her and their daughter and the messy, beautiful reality of family over everything else. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too. Always." Outside, the city hummed with its endless energy, but inside there was only warmth and love, and the quiet certainty that they were exactly where they were meant to be, together, chosen, home,